Recording in progress. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Good morning, honorable members. Allow me the opportunity to welcome all of you who have logged into the virtual mini-plenary. There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. Honorable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini-plenary is deemed to be in the precincts of Parliament and thus constitute a meeting of the National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, will apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything that is said on the platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in are considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when requested and recognized to do so. The microphones are very sensitive and it picks up noise which may disturb the attention of other members. And when recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone, and where connectivity permits, connect your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of the screens, which has an option that allows a member to put up his or her hand to raise points of order. The Secretariat will assist me in this regard. Lastly, when using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary points of order or interjections. The first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Honorable M.A. Maimane. I now recognize the Honorable Maimane.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, and good morning to you and to honorable members. Honorable members, today we enter a debate about truly the future of our nation. I want to appeal to you, for all of us who are entrusted to defend our Constitution, the rights of every learner, and the future of our nation. Education in and of itself has its own intrinsic value in who the learner becomes, but it also has an extrinsic value in what the learner does, what the future of work will look like, and what ultimately it tells us about what our ambition as a nation is. Our ambition must be better than where we are in terms of our term scores. It must be that we want to be global players who can influence and change the world. If we want to be that, it has to begin with how we view our education and what we do with our education. Honorable members, nations that have had incredible success in the last 30 years have done so on the back of a very strong education system. So our debate today really should not be about posturing. It should be about finding consensus. It should be about implementing meaningful reforms and making sure that yours, my children, the children of this nation have a future that will equip them to compete with anyone in the world. Our motion today really speaks to the heart of the Department of Basic Education, active decision to maintain a minimum pass mark of 30% in certain grade 12 subjects. Let me reiterate. Getting 30% in all subjects in matric does not mean you've passed matric, but it does mean you are deemed proficient in that respective subject. And I want to take mathematics as an example. If we were to take young people and say we would pass them at 40%, the pass mark of last year's cohort would move from 69% to 47%. And if we did it at 50%, then it would only mean 30% of our learners are passing mathematics at 50%. Honorable members, if we did the same for science, at 30%, 75% actually pass. but at 50%, only 29% of our learners pass maths and science. Now, we could all agree the future of work will be heavily reliant on maths and science. AI and future technologies will require these as basic subjects. And in all essence, we're not preparing our young people for that future. I find it indefensible, and I would argue, honorable members, that today, if we use our speeches to be able to oppose or to certainly in any ways, just simply, I want to remind us that our parents, our young people are watching, and perhaps maybe this may be one of the most meaningful things we could do as administration. I want to say it's not only just about the pass mark. It's clearly about the structural inequalities and weaknesses that are in our education system. Let me illustrate this point, maybe by personalizing it and looking at a learner who, for this purpose, I'll call Setu. Setu's story is not dramatic. It is generally typical. This is a young South African who's born in a community where ECD centers and childhood development centers are scarce. In essence, her mother potentially may not be able to afford a well-resourced ECD center, so they're reliant on what we do as policymakers. She may be one of 200,000 children who enter the ECD sector, only getting 1% of our national budget. Her subsidy will be far less than what we give to a prisoner. By age of 5, Setu would have already accumulated a developmental deficit measurable in years. And when a child starts grade R behind, the system hardly does enough to help her catch up. When Setu enters primary school, she encounters the reality that characterizes far too many schools. She will likely be in a classroom of 40 to 50 learners, a teacher-to-learner ratio that is now starting to worsen. Her school was likely to be one of the 74% of the schools who do not have a library, or one of the 10,938 schools who do not have a single flushing toilet. By grade 4, honorable members, she's likely not to be able to read for meaning. And once literacy is lost, every subject becomes harder, mathematics becomes decoding, not reasoning, science becomes memorization. And then from grade 7 onwards, the system continues to move her through grades without her actually having mastered the basics. By the time she gets to matric, honorable members, she might be able to achieve the 30 or 40% required for her to pass. But the system will assess her differently. She may not be placed in a TVET college. She may not go to higher education. Universities will assess her differently, and employers will ultimately deem her unemployable. This is the story, not dramatic, but very typical. So I would urge, honorable members, as we enter this debate today, ending the 30% pass mark is not the only standalone reform. It signals the seriousness that we will hold about standards. It must be accompanied by comprehensive system-wide changes, as the motion suggests. We must remove this lower threshold if we're going to address the weaknesses beneath it. And I would argue that today we could make that very profound start. Her expectation that a matric student who has participated in an academic program should know at least half of the content is reasonable, considering that 12 years of continuous learning has already taken place. So I urge us, honorable members, let us move the pass mark from 30 to 50% progressively. And therefore, when this motion tables, that the Minister of Basic Education can table reforms that ensure that every learner, Setu, as one of the South Africans, can be able to compete with anyone else in this world. I urge you to support this motion, honorable members. I thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, honorable member. The next speaker is the Honorable Letsia.
Chairperson, I hope I'm audible.
You are audible, honorable member, and you may proceed.
Thank you very much. December is a critical period both globally and within our own country as we commemorate the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. Allow me to utilize this solemn moment upon all men across the length and breadth of our nation to rise as champions in the fight against gender-based violence and child abuse. This growing scourge continues to undermine the very fabric of our society. It is a profoundly damaging impact on the basic education sector, where the safety, dignity, and holistic development of our learners must remain paramount. It is therefore incumbent upon us, particularly men, to become active agents of change, to confront harmful norms, and to build a future grounded in respect, equality, and justice. House Chairperson, the continuous improvement of our education system is our collective responsibility. Education is a critical developmental instrument that must assist us to grapple with the legacies of colonialism of a special type towards breaking the chains of poverty, reducing inequality, and expanding opportunities of self-development and upwards mobility for all, regardless of race, class, and socioeconomic context. I want to place this on record, that we cannot grow public confidence in our education system without being honest about performance. We must dispel the persistent and misleading narrative regarding the National Senior Certificate pass requirement. Let it be stated unambiguously that 30% is not a pass mark in the curriculum of education. A candidate who attains an overall aggregate of 30% across the subject written will not meet the minimum requirement for a pass. There are established subject-specific thresholds and promotional criteria that must be satisfied, and an aggregate of 30% falls far short of these standards. There can be no ambiguity on this matter. The NSC pass requirement are as follows. For a bachelor pass requirement, a candidate must obtain at least 40% for the candidate's home language, and this is compulsory. Anything less than 40%, this candidate will not achieve a bachelor pass. They must also at least get 50% for the candidate's 4 other subjects, excluding life orientation. They must obtain at least 30% for the language of learning and teaching of that higher education institution. They must obtain at least 30% for 1 other subject, and they must pass at least 6 of the 7 subjects. The second one is the diploma pass requirements. They must also at least get 40% for the candidate's home language, which is compulsory, must obtain at least 40% for 3 other subjects, excluding life orientation, must get at least 30% for the language of learning and teaching of higher education institution. They must at least obtain 30% for 1 other subject and pass at least 6 of the 7 subjects. As certificate pass requirements, a candidate must obtain 40% for the candidate's home language, which is also compulsory, must at least get 30% for the language of learning and teaching of the higher education institution, must obtain at least 40% for the 2 other subjects, must obtain at least 30% for 3 other subjects, and must pass at least 6 of the 7 subjects. Therefore, honorable members, it is evident that each NSC level has its own set of subject combination and minimum percentage marks. The 30% requirement applies only to specific subjects for passing matric. The idea that learner can get 30% in all subjects and pass matric is incorrect, it's false, it's fallacy. We must stress this point to ensure understanding and dispel misconceptions that undermine our education system. House Chairperson, we live in a diverse and ever-evolving society. Our education system cannot be reduced to a single percentage, but must be engaged within a nuanced manner that appreciates its historical and present realities. It must equip our learners to meaningfully contribute to all sectors of the society. As such, differentiated pass requirements ensure that learners are assessed on their different capacities and prepared for diverse pathways, as demonstrated in the 3-stream model of academic, vocational, and occupational training. The effectiveness of our education will continue to be undermined if we do not urgently tackle the structural inequalities that still plague our education system. We must swiftly resolve the unevenness in the teacher training, resource disparities between school, infrastructure backlogs, and curriculum inconsistencies, all of which shapes learners' performances. Notwithstanding these challenges, we must continue to build on our strides. We must continue to build on strides of our NSC that the NSC has made towards global recognition. with our qualification benchmarked against international standard. We take pride in the fact that the caliber of learners produced in this education system in South Africa is capable of competing and succeeding in higher education institutions across the world in various fields, such as medicine and engineering. Honorable Chairperson, the NC remains steadfast in advancing the aspiration of the Freedom Charter, adopted 70 years ago in 1955 in Kliptown, which boldly declared that the doors of learning and culture shall be open to all. As the NC-led government will continue to give life to this historic mandate by expanding access, strengthening equity, and ensuring that every child, regardless of their educational circumstances, has the opportunity to realize their full potential through quality education. Therefore, any reforms to the NSC minimum pass requirement cannot be divorced from broader social transformation objective, both as constitutional obligation enshrined in Section 29 and as a historical duty committed to advancing the national democratic revolution. Thank you very much, House Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Ngubane.
Honourable Chair, let me put this back. House Chairperson, honourable members and South Africans at large, the debate on reforming the National Senior Certificate pass requirements centers on national educational standards, student preparedness for higher education and the workforce, socio-economic factors and equity across the school. The National Senior Certificate, NSC, is a critical qualification in South Africa, serving as a gateway to higher education and employment. Currently, the minimum...
Honourable Ngubane, may I request you to switch off your video, because the feed from your side is not, the connection is not stable. Okay. So maybe if you switch it off, it will be better.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Currently, the minimum pass requirements for the NSCs are set at 30% for most subjects and 40% for others, sparking public debate about whether these thresholds are too low. Today, we'll explore both sides of the argument. Should South Africa reform the policy on NSC minimum pass requirements? The current policy sets low expectations and fails to equip learners with the necessary skills for post-school success. It generally lowers the South African quality standard of education, global competitiveness. Schools across the globe yearly compete in high school mathematics, science, biology, English, and other high school critical subjects. South Africa on its own volition, chooses not to participate in these competitions to measure its global standards of education. A 30 or 40% pass mark in a subject is not a true measure of a student's ability to cope with the rigors of PSET university or TVET college education, leading to high dropout rates in higher education institutions. One thing we do not do in the universities as a measure, we do not measure the students, the caliber of students, the classification of students who are in maths, who are doing science degrees, actuarial degrees, and those that are doing administrative degrees, that's like PA, Bachelor of Social Science Administration. We need to start to have that measurement on university so that we can get a true reflection of what students are we producing at a 30%, because most students who are producing at a 30% are not doing high-end degrees, but are doing low-end degrees. Raising the standards would increase the perceived and actual value of the NSC qualification, both nationally and internationally, ensuring South African learners are competitive in a global context. Implementing stricter requirements will encourage a better teaching and lecture and learning culture, driving students to strive for greater mastery of the curriculum, e.g. aiming for 50% or higher, rather than just meeting a low minimum threshold. Raising the bar would force the education system to address underlying quality issues, such as teacher training, teacher training, early childhood development, and curriculum delivery, rather than using low pass mark to artificially inflate overall pass rate. The current minimum pass marks of 30 and 40% are too low and fail to ensure students have mastered necessary skills and knowledge. Raising these pass requirements would encourage higher academic standards and better prepare students for post-school qualification and labor market. There is another element of global competitiveness. South Africa's education systems lags behind other middle-income countries in terms of tertiary enrollment and attainment rates. Higher pass rates requirements will align the NSCs with international standards, improving the country's global competitiveness. Universities and employers often require higher marks than the NSC minimum thresholds. Reforming the policy would ensure that students meet these expectations and reduce mismatches between education and labor market needs. On the equity and accountability, raising the pass marks requirements will push schools to improve teaching quality, provide better support to students, especially in under-resourced schools. It will also ensure what the NSC remains a credible qualification valued by higher education institutions and employers. There are things that we need to solve in the NSC performance, the inequalities, socioeconomic disparities. Students from wealthier schools, quintiles 5, consistently outperform those from poor schools, quintiles 1 to 3. However, the achievement gap in NSC pass rate between quintile 1 and quintile 5 schools has narrowed significantly over time from 48% points in 2008 to just 10% points in 2023. Despite this progress, poorer schools still face challenges such as limited resources, overcrowded classrooms, and less qualified teachers, which hinder their students' performance. Quintiles 1 to 3 schools have historically contributed fewer higher level passes in critical subjects like mathematics and physical science. However, their share of high level passes has improved over time, rising from 27% in 2008 to 50% in 2023 on mathematics. Gender dynamics. Historically, male candidates outperformed female candidates in NSC pass rates, but these gaps narrowed during the pandemic years. By 2023, female candidates were outperforming male candidates in bachelor pass rates, indicating a shift in gender inequalities. The unintended consequences, higher pass requirements could lead increased dropout rate as students will struggle academically, may feel discouraged and leave prematurely. Either way, the Statistics South Africa latest has revealed that that need keeps on increasing year by year, even on the current lowering of the 30 to 40 pass mark policy. Many outside factors like economy, rejuvenation, and employment must be the focus of the day to reduce the need. So the need is not a measure that we can say we are doing well in our pass rate currently. In summary, while inequalities in NSC performance have declined over time, systemic disparities in resources and opportunities continue to affect outcomes, particularly in poorer schools. Addressing these inequalities is crucial for ensuring equitable access to quality education and improving overall NSC performance. We need to desist from just percentagizing the pass rate of our students. We need to look at the actual socioeconomic factors that contribute to this lowering of the pass rate. It is the quintile 1 to 3 that is affected most by this reducing of the pass rate mark. So we need to focus on mostly the poorest of the poorest by putting all our resources, all our mechanisms to these poor schools, but not reducing the pass rate, improving the resource allocation to the poorest school, improving the socioeconomic outlook in the poorer schools, in improving the teacher training in these poorer schools. All our resources need to divert to the poor schools so that we make sure that we up the numbers of the pass rate. As MK Party will focus all our resources to reduce socioeconomic factors that keeps producing quintile 1 to 3 students schools in order to level the playing ground. We will channel resources from the rich schools to the poor schools. We will develop and focus our energy on pro-poor schools. So, Chair, in that manner, I conclude my debate that we need to focus on poor schools and stop percentagizing our poor kids as if they are lesser than the others, but make sure that we empower them and give them resources and tutor support so that as well they pass with 50% and not celebrate the higher pass rate that is higher because we've lowered the percentage of pass rate to 30%. But we need to celebrate the genuineness of 50+1% pass rate of our students by equipping them. Thank you very much, Chairperson, for this debate. MK appreciates the debate that has been proposed by Mr. Moimane. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Minister of Basic Education.
Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, I welcome this opportunity to engage in this important discussion about our standards in our basic education system, specifically the proposal to end the so-called 30% pass mark. This debate resurfaces frequently, and it is essential to the public and to parents and to teachers and learners to hear the facts clearly without distortion. At the heart of this discussion is a shared national concern, whether our education system is equipping young people with the knowledge and skills they need to thrive, and whether the standards we set reflect the ambitions we hold for our country. On this, honourable members, there is no disagreement. We all want to achieve higher standards, stronger outcomes, and a system that is fit for purpose in a competitive global economy. However, raising standards is not achieved by slogans, nor by misrepresenting the policy, nor by imagining that the complex work of curriculum assessment, teacher development, infrastructure, and early learning can be reduced to a single number. Raising standards requires evidence, reform, and sustained coordinated action across the system. Members, let me start by restating the facts already placed on record in Parliament. There's no such a thing as a 30% overall pass mark in the National Senior Certificate. Learners do not obtain a matric certificate by achieving 30%. To simply pass the NSC, a learner must meet a three-tiered set of subject requirements, including at least 40% in home language, at least 40% in 2 further subjects, and at least 30% in 3 additional subjects. Higher thresholds apply for obtaining admission to a diploma and bachelor studies. This structure is long-standing, internationally aligned, and reflects the NSC's nature as a multi-subject qualification rather than a single exam system. More importantly, and this is where I want to draw the members' attention, the minimum threshold is not the norm. Out of the 724,000 learners who wrote the NSC last year, only 189 passed with this minimum subject combination requirement. That is just 0.003% of the overall numbers. The fact is this: the majority of our learners who pass the NSC either obtain admission to diploma or bachelor studies. To claim that learners pass matric with 30% is therefore not supported by evidence. It is a misunderstanding and perhaps a distortion of how the NSC works, and it must be corrected so that the public debate rests on facts rather than rhetoric. By correcting this misconception is only the beginning. The far more important question here, Chair, is how do we raise standards meaningfully throughout the system? How do we ensure that more learners excel in gateway subjects and achieve more bachelor passes, and that all young people leave the system with a meaningful opportunity or qualification? Members, raising standards standards will not be achieved by adjusting one number in grade 12. Real and sustainable improvement depends on strengthening the entire architecture of basic education: curriculum, assessment, teacher development, school resources, and most critically, foundational learning. And that is why one of the major reforms of this administration has to be setting up the National Education and Training Council, South Africa's very first national advisory body focused specifically on school education. This council is an institutional reform, not a political response. Its mandate is to provide independent, expert, evidence-informed advice on the key drivers of quality. I have tasked the Council with reviewing South Africa's current assessment progression and promotion requirements across grades R to 12 and advising whether they remain appropriate, equitable, and aligned with international best practice. This includes analyzing existing legislation, studying comparative systems, assessing implications for pedagogy, and proposing reforms grounded in evidence. The Council is also advising me on strengthening foundational learning and identifying a minimum package of support required to improve early grade literacy and numeracy. This work goes to the heart of our national challenge. If a child cannot read for meaning by grade 4, their chances of succeeding in later grades diminish sharply. Performance in math, science, and other gateway subjects, and ultimately in matric, rests on the strength of early foundations. This is why expanding access to early childhood care and education, improving the teaching and learning of early literacy and numeracy, and supporting educators with better materials and training is central to the priorities of this administration. Honorable members, raising the matric pass mark cannot solve what is fundamentally a foundational learning challenge. The department is also strengthening the system's capacity to provide diverse learner pathways. In partnership with DHEAD, we are improving learner tracking from grade 12, we're expanding access to schools of skill, we are strengthening technical and vocational offering, and enhancing articulation into TVET colleges. Our goal is to ensure that every learner leaves the system with meaningful skill, qualification, or opportunity. This is particularly important because actually the biggest dropout point is not matric. It is grade 10 and 11, where many learners who have not acquired a strong foundation struggle to progress. And so simply raising the NSC pass threshold without addressing the root causes of poor performance earlier in the system would just push more learners out and deepen inequality. Raising standards cannot mean raising barriers. It must mean raising support. The credibility of the NSC remains intact and internationally recognized. Umalusi's rigorous quality assurance processes, moderating papers, verifying school-based assessments, auditing marking, and certifying results to ensure that the NSC meets global standards every year. Each examination cycle is an immense national undertaking involving thousands of markers, moderators, monitors, and officials. And I want to express my appreciation to all our partners across the province who have done this work. To the class of 2025 who have concluded their exams this week, well done. You have demonstrated resilience and commitment, and I also acknowledge the families and communities who supported these learners throughout the year. Members, we cannot talk about raising standards without speaking frankly about what is actually the most urgent issue facing our education system. The fact that 8 out of 10 10-year-olds in South Africa cannot read for meaning. This is the national emergency. If children cannot read, they cannot learn. If they cannot learn, they cannot progress. If they cannot progress, they cannot build a future for themselves or contribute fully to an economy. This is why foundational learning, including ECD, and teaching of literacy and numeracy in grades R to 3 is at the center of what is a real reform agenda. When we strengthen the early years, we transform the trajectory of every year that follows. We improve performance in high school. We increase bachelor passes. We enhance participation in maths and science. We expand the life chances of young people across the country. Raising the matric pass rate will not address the foundational learning crisis. It will not improve reading fluency in grade 3, nor strengthen early mathematics, nor improve teaching quality, no reduced dropout rates. What will raise standards is sustained commitment to evidence-based reforms, better teaching support, stronger early learning programs, coherent assessment policies, safe and well-resourced schools, and pathways that recognize the diverse strengths and aspirations of our young people.
Honourable Minister, your time has now expired. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Shikwambana.
Thank you, House Chair. Honourable members, when a nation lowers the bar for its children, it's not raising their chances, it is burying their potential. 30 years into democracy, government continues to tell the black child that 30% pass mark is enough. The percentage is not enough. It will never be enough for a country that claims to want transformation and for a generation that must compete in a global knowledge-based economy. Let us speak honestly. A child who passes with 30% will not become an engineer. That child will not become a pilot, a doctor, an auditor, a metallurgist, an accountant, or an IT specialist. These are the professions that build nations. These are the sectors where innovations happen. These are the spaces still dominated by the minority, not because black children are incapable, but because the system designed for them has been weakened, diluted, and continuously under-resourced. We know the truth. A black child can do more and is capable of far more. Our children are not failing, they are being failed. They are failed by overcrowded classrooms, failed by the schools without libraries, laboratories, or learning tools needed to build confident thinkers, failed by teachers who themselves came through this collapsed education system, failed by a government that prefers high-pass statistics over real learning. Instead of fixing the foundation of reading, comprehension, writing, numeracy, and science exposure, the government chooses the easy option, lower the bar, celebrate the numbers, and pretend that the system is functioning. Behind every 30% pass is a child who will never access the profession where transformation is most urgent. That child will not be in the cockpit, not in the operating theater, not in the laboratories, not in the audit room, not in the mines as metallurgists, not in the software engineering labs, and not in the financial centers where national decisions are shaped. This means we are quietly reproducing inequality, systematically and deliberately, in the name of increasing pass rate. The EFF demands a higher standard, not because we want to punish our children, but because we believe in them more than this government has ever shown. We insist on excellence because our children are capable of excellence. We want the black child in Taung, Guyana, Engo, Soweto, Bushbuck-Ridge, Mamelodi, and Seychelles to access the sectors that have been monopolized for decades so they can compete locally, thrive globally, and break the cycles of exclusion once and for all. A nation that wants excellence must invest in excellence. Excellence begins with belief. It begins with the conviction that the black child deserves nothing less than a world-class education and a meaningful chance of at life. In closing, the 30% must be scrapped as the basis of a pass mark in this country. It is misleading, it is harmful, and it is collapsing the future of our children. We therefore demand that the government introduce a 50% pass mark as the new national standard. Rise the bar, rise the expectation, and rise the future. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Matri.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The IFP welcomes this debate because it goes to the heart of a problem we have raised times without number. We cannot build a prosperous nation while we continue telling our learners that 30% is an acceptable standard. When we tell our learners that 30% is enough to pass, we are ignoring 70% of their potential. Education must be above equipment our children to achieve their full potential and not embracing mediocrity as normal. We have said it before and we will say it again. 30% metric pass mark creates a false sense of achievement. It lowers expectations, and once expectations are lowered, performance low follows. A child who is told that 30% is good enough is being prepared for disappointment, not for success, as this is unfair, especially to learners in schools that already face severe socio-economic challenges. The IFP has consistently called for the minimum pass mark to be raised to 50%. Raising the pass mark is not about punishing learners. It is an investment for their future. It is also about honesty. A learner who achieves 30% is not ready for the demands of higher education or the modern workforce, and we cannot continue pretending otherwise. When standards are low, we get comfortable with the mediocrity, but it's when set the standard high, our children will be emboldened to strive for better. However, raising standards cannot happen in isolation. It must be meshed with an education system capable of supporting learners to reach those standards. We cannot ignore the systematic challenges that continue to hold our learners back, particularly in townships and rural areas. Thousands of qualified teachers remain unemployed. Most schools have no libraries, and many learners still attend schools under inhuman conditions. This is why the IFP believes that any shift in the pass mark policy must be accompanied by a well-resourced program improved to entire learning environment. This should include strengthening teacher support, improving learner materials, and ensuring that curriculum delivery is monitored consistently. Setting a higher benchmark must go hand in hand with ensuring that every school, regardless of the location, has the capacity to help learners reach it. Therefore, the IFP supports this resolution because South Africa deserves an education system that prepares its young people not for survival, but for success. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Hendricks.
Honourable Chair, Honourable Members, fellow citizens, the Patriotic Alliance welcomes this debate brought on by Mr. Honourable Vusima Imani. The Patriotic Alliance, I stand before you today on behalf of the Patriotic Alliance, not merely to critique this policy, but to sound a clarion call for the restoration of intellectual rigor and future-ready competitiveness in our nation's basic education system. The issue at hand is the 30% pass mark for the National Senior Certificate, which, while intended to boost student graduation rates, has negatively impacted the quality of our education and future opportunities for our students. This low benchmark fails to set a meaningful standard of achievement, reflecting an acceptance of mediocrity in our education. The low 30% pass mark creates an unhealthy incentive, and students realize they can advance with minimal effort. This reduction in expectations lower ambition in classrooms and instill the troubling belief that mediocrity is acceptable. The education system focus on low passing standards has left students unprepared for the demand of tertiary institutions and modern industries. As a result, many first-year university students face challenges leading to high dropout rates and negative impact on their self-esteem and financial stability. The Patriotic Alliance advocates for a significant intervention to raise the official pass mark, aiming to set a higher standard of competency. We propose a consultative process to enhance the quality of teaching, inspire better learning, and ensure that graduates have the skill necessary for success after school. Let us be clear, this is not about excluding learners. It's about including them in a future of genuine opportunities. It is about replacing a culture of minimal compliance with a culture of excellence. By raising standards, we are not raising the barrier to success. We are raising the floor of their potential. And I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Bosov.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. If a country has a high rate of participation and success in the education system, but limited success in the job market, it means something is wrong. So what is wrong with South African education? The answer is many things. In the first place, the National Senior Certificate is not designed for employment. It is designed to prepare learners for further study, yet, for the vast majority of matriculants, it is all they have to enter the job market. From an employment perspective, it is better to leave school after grade 9 and do a vocational qualification at the TVET college than to complete matric as the highest qualification. Yet, popular perception regards such a decision as second best. A common, unhelpful criticism is to calculate the real matric pass rate by only comparing the number of grade 1s in a specific year and compare it to the matrics 12 years later. It is offensive to count learners who left school after grade 9 for vocational training as failures of the school system. But worse than offensive, it is harmful. Why are there so many high schools and so few TVET colleges? It is in part the stigma, but also the reality of available teachers and equipment. If you teach geography or history, you only need a teacher and a classroom. Vocational training requires a simulated workplace and a lecturer, whose knowledge and skills often command better compensation outside of education. Even school subjects with a direct employment advantage, like hospitality studies or agricultural technology, don't get taught at schools where it could really make a difference, but at the others where it might be less important. There are more problems. The progression policy determines that the learner cannot spend more than 4 years in a phase. It is good not to have 17-year-olds in grade 7, but it also means that learners are progressed when they should actually repeat the year. Currently, teachers are organized in trade unions with a culture of workplace contestation. More appropriate is a professional association where members impose the highest standards on themselves. And now the 30% pass rate. That is a popular work of fiction, creating a way to score political points without addressing the actual, very complicated problem. The result is, the reality is, if you get 30%, you fail the subject. Yet, you may still receive a National Senior Certificate provided the failed subject is neither a language nor mathematics or mathematic literacy, and the mark is not below 30%. Also, a Senior Certificate with a bachelor's, diploma or certificate pass rate are three vastly different things with different access. A distinction remains a distinction. We need to discuss these things informed and reasonable and desist from allegation which undermine our credibility. To allege that South Africa has a pass rate of 30% is an effective one-liner, and it seems to explain everything that is wrong. But it is not. Listening to the speech of Dr. Maimane and to the proposed resolution, I will admit that his argument has more to it than the one-liner and can be supported. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Ngobeni.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. House Chair, this is indeed a very timely debate that requires us to be politically honest. Unfortunately, the powers that be choose otherwise, as we have just heard from the previous speaker as well as the minister's debate. And so before we go any further, House Chair, we must guard against getting lost in semantics. Let us not shroud this moment in technicalities. South Africans know the truth. The 30% pass mark rhetoric is not a myth. It is not a distortion. It is not opposition theatrics. It is a lived reality. And anyone who pretends otherwise does so to confuse the nation rather than to confront the crisis that is before us. Chairperson, 30 years into our democracy, South Africa must face the painful truth that our education system stands as the single greatest failure of the post-apartheid project. It is not a small administrative weakness, it is a profound injustice, a betrayal of the promise that freedom would open the doors of learning and opportunity to every child. We entered democracy believing equality would finally take root. Yet today, a child's future is still determined by the circumstances of their birth and the dysfunction of the school they are allocated to. There is no clearer injustice than an education system that robs a child of their potential before they even discover it. This crisis did not emerge by accident. It is the result of deliberate political choices, lowering standards instead of elevating them, celebrating pass rates instead of relearning, protecting political interests instead of protecting children, and choosing comfort over courage. This is how a 30% pass mark became acceptable. This is how illiteracy in the foundation phase became normal. This is how teachers were left unsupported, principals unaccountable, and children abandoned in a system meant to uplift them. Today, half of the learners who begin grade 1 do not reach matric. Most grade 4 learners cannot read for meaning, and our economy is starved of artisans, engineers, and skilled workers because the system that should produce them is collapsing. This is not transformation. This is not empowerment. It is a national injustice repeated every single year. Honorable Chair and members, South Africa deserves far, far better. We deserve an education system that restores dignity, unlocks talent, and builds a modern competitive economy. We must stand firmly for a future where every child masters reading and numeracy in early years, where high standards are non-negotiable, where principals and schools are held fully accountable through transparent performance measures, where teachers are trained, respected, and treated as nation builders, where learners choose their future, academic or vocational, without shame or limited opportunity, and where every school is a place of safety, dignity, and aspiration. A child who receives poor education is not free. A nation that denies opportunity is not just, and a government that normalizes mediocrity cannot claim to be transforming this country. Honorable House Chairperson, the failure of post-apartheid education is a wound carried by millions, but this moment can be a turning point if we choose honesty over comfort, competency over mediocrity, and courage over political correctness. If the GNU chooses excuses and blurred numbers, then South Africans must choose excellence, ambition, and accountability. Action SA supports the merits of this debate because refusing to do so would signal a lack of belief in our youth and, by extension, in the future of our nation. South Africa will rise only when the education system rises as well. I thank you, Honorable House Chairperson and members.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Reverend K.R.J. Meshu.
Thank you, Chairperson. The ACDP welcomes this very important debate on Dr. Maimani's resolution to end the 30% matric pass mark and raise standards in basic education. Our learners must be able to read with meaning and confidence from the youngest age possible, which is not the case at present. For too long, South Africa has tolerated failure as disguised as success. Our matric pass mark, be it 30% or 40%, does not prepare learners for tertiary education or the workplace. It is a false comfort that masks systematic failure. As the Department of Basic Education itself acknowledged, I quote, any potential changes to pass requirements or curriculum structure must be evidence-based, internationally benchmarked, and aligned with South Africa's developmental needs. The ACDP has always argued that education must be a ladder out of poverty, not a trapdoor into unemployment. Public debate has intensified with the 30% threshold called a meager pass mark that hurts our pupils. Social media has echoed this frustration, demanding decisive action. Cambridge O-levels, still run internationally, have long succeeded in countries such as Singapore, Mauritius, Pakistan, and Zimbabwe. As academic Martin Pugh observed, Zimbabwe's school system has outperformed South Africa's despite spending far less per learner amidst a decade of economic chaos. If our general education and training certificate were upgraded to carry more esteem in the labor market, a young people leaving school at grade 9 would have genuine pathways into apprenticeship, entry-level jobs, and vocational training, reducing the scourge of youth unemployment while restoring dignity to non-academic learners ensuring that their efforts are recognized rather than dismissed as inadequate. The ACDP supports this resolution and thank Mr. Maimane for it. We call on this House to embrace a culture of achievement, especially in maths and science, where every learner reaches their God-given potential and education becomes the cornerstone of a national renewal. Lastly, raising standards with proper support for teachers and learners will send a clear message to the public and internationally that South Africa values education. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Nontenja.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. House Chair, since the dawn of democracy, government has made significant legislative reforms in expanding access and creating equality in education, particularly for the underprivileged South Africans. However, the country's educational system is suggestively falling far behind the rest of the world's overall quality, and this 30% mark worsens the situation. The 30% pass mark sends the wrong message to learners, parents, and society. It tells our children that minimum effort is enough when the modern world requires high-level literacy, numeracy, and critical thinking skills. Employers already report that many matriculants lack basic competencies, and universities struggle with underprepared students. 30% pass mark limits learners from qualifying for higher education admission due to non-competitive credentials, and it contradicts one of the department's core objectives, which is committing to quality. South Africa's education crisis demands urgent action. Raising the standards by ending the 30% mark is not about punishing learners, but about protecting their futures. We need stronger foundations in reading, maths, and science, more teacher support, and accountability in schools. A higher pass mark requirement will encourage better teaching, better learning, and ultimately a more competitive workforce. If we maintain low expectations, we guarantee low outcomes. South Africa deserves a system that builds excellence, not just survival. Keeping standards low traps learners in a cycle of mediocrity. If we wait for a perfect system, we will wait forever. Setting higher standards can be a catalyst for system improvement. It creates agency, demands accountability, and motivates investment. Excellence must start somewhere. The UTM supports this motion.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Ghani.
Thank you very much, Nakensam Samastolu. Let's remind ourselves, honorable members, on why we send our children to school. We do so because we want them to learn, to grow, and to become better human beings. We want them to become productive citizens who will contribute to the growth and development of our country and the world. For many years, we have debated the question of pass marks. What percentage is acceptable? What minimum requirement is fair? And what threshold defines success? But I want to ask today, are we becoming pass mark sensitive in the same way that consumers are price sensitive? Are we obsessing over a number instead of the quality of learning behind it? The danger of this obsession is clear. If we focus only on raising the pass rates, we may be tempted to lower the standards, to reduce the level of difficulty in the same way that companies shrink the size of a product but keep the price the same. The unintended consequence is that we risk producing learners who hold certificates but lack competencies, young people whose potential has been compromised in the pursuit of statistical victories. The obsession we should all agree on is that of quality. We must focus on helping our children become the best versions of themselves, and this cannot happen by chance. It requires deliberate and consistent investment. It begins with strong teacher development because no education system can rise above the quality of its teachers. It requires leadership development for principals because a school thrives or breaks down under its leadership. It demands a safe, well-resourced, and conducive environment for learning and teaching. All of us in this house are products of an education system. We stand here today because at some point, a teacher, a community, or a school helped shape our path. We must look honestly at what worked, strengthen it, and replicate it across more schools and more communities. The resolution before us is not controversial. It is reasonable and worthy of support, but more importantly, it is a reminder that our national obsession should be with quality, with ensuring that every child reaches their full potential. Honorable members, let us commit ourselves to building an education system that does not just pass children, but prepares them for life, a system that does not just measure results, but builds character, competence, and confidence. That is the future our children deserve, and it is the standard we must insist on.
Well, thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Schlazo Webster.
Thank you very much, House Chair. In her remarks, the Minister referred to minimum standards as one number. Honourable Tebogo Lete of the ANC said the education system cannot be reduced to a single percentage. And so I want to paint a picture of what it can certainly be reduced to. The young woman who comes and becomes the first to finish matric in her family, only to discover that she cannot access university or complete a TVET qualification. The young man who passes but cannot enter apprenticeship pathways because his marks close doors instead of opening them. It's the mother who celebrates a pass, not knowing that the system has already limited her child's future before it has even begun, and those are the young people who need us today. The Honourable Minister outlined the technical design of the National Senior Certificates, the weighting, assessment structure, and I appreciate the clarity with which the Minister always engages the House on those issues and those technicalities. But I want to also remove any confusion. At no point have we argued that the aggregate pass mark is 30%. That is not in the draft resolution. It is not our position as Build One South Africa and has never been. Our concern is straightforward. The policy still allows 3 individual subjects to be passed at 30%, and we believe that no subject should be deemed as a pass at 30%. Secondly, after the technical explanations, we have to return to the lived reality of the children and the parents that we serve. Because while the system may be complex, the outcomes are painfully simple. A learner can pass matric with 3 subjects at 30% and 3 at 40%, and even with that pass, they may not meaningfully access the next stage of life. Only a small fraction of learners who pass matric actually qualify for university. That is a fact. And of those, fewer than 15% make it through to graduation. For TVET colleges, which are the backbone of our skills economy, the throughput is equally low. Many learners enter, but most don't complete because the academic foundations are too weak from the start. I want to say this as I close. There is not a single parent in this house who would accept a 30% or 40% for their own house. Not because we're harsh, but because we know what that means for the future, what that mark would mean even as a subject for the future. Yet somehow, as a nation and as leaders in a nation, we've come to accept that for South Africa's children, something that none of us would accept in our own homes for our children. And that's a moral contradiction. Minister, I know your commitment to education and I know it's sincere. And because of that, I extend this invitation to you. This isn't about access or quality. We want both for our children. So let's raise the standard together. Let's align our technical frameworks with real demands of universities, TVET colleges, and the labor markets. And let's send a message to our young people that they don't expect less of them, believe they can achieve more. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable Gabo.
I'm here from the ATM, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Zungula, I did not receive an indication that you will be speaking on this topic, but you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Despite our country having a 46% youth unemployment rate, we've been telling our youth that they work hard, get education, they will succeed. But the truth is, we are educating our children for jobs that do not exist, while ignoring the industries that actually build nations. South Africa's economy is rooted in mineral resources, mining, agriculture, energy, and industrial production. Yet our education system is rooted in theory, paperwork, and outdated colonial design. And then we pretend to be shocked when millions of young people cannot find work. The problem is not the youth. The problem is in the curriculum that betrays them. The country sits on the richest mineral deposits on earth: platinum, chrome, manganese, rare earth minerals. The entire world needs the entire world's needs for the green economy. Yet in most schools, a child will never learn how minerals are extracted, how beneficiation works, how industrial processes create value, how mining can be done responsibly. Instead, we export raw minerals and import finished products 10 times the price because we refuse to educate our people the process to own their own resources. We do not have an education system that teaches irrigation, agri-processing, soil science, livestock management, or modern farming technology. We import food we should be producing. We let farmland lie idle while unemployment rises. We separate education from the economy, and that act confused when the economy collapses. We shut down technical schools. We starve artisan training. We killed off industrial colleges. And now we cry about infrastructure failure, manufacturing decline, load shedding, broken machinery, and companies that cannot find local skills. We created that crisis, and we can fix it by only rebuilding technical and vocational education at a scale. Why do we have degrees with no economic purpose? Why do we have schools with no science labs? Why do we have universities pumping out graduates who are already ready for nothing the country actually needs? Because a misaligned education keeps South Africa dependent on imported food, dependent on foreign engineers, dependent on multinational corporations that take our minerals and return finished products with a 400% markup. Dependency is profitable, just not for us. We need an education system that trains mining engineers in mining towns, trains agricultural scientists in rural provinces, trains artisans in modern, well-funded technical colleges, prioritizes beneficiation, manufacturing, robotics, and renewable energy, links every school and university to the sector driving the real economy. This is how we build sovereignty.
Remember, your time is now expired. Thank you. May I request the other parties that appear on the speaking list with no name next to it to contact the NA table so that we can ensure that we proceed smoothly and not skip any member that wishes to participate in the debate. The next speaker is the Honorable Gabo.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Honorable members, today I rise on behalf of the African National Congress, the movement entrusted by generations of South Africans to drive the transformation and advance the interests of the people, to engage in this crucial debate that speaks directly to the heart of our developmental agenda. For the ANC, education is not only a policy area, it is our apex priority and the foundation upon which a capable, inclusive, and a prosperous nation must be built. Every reform we consider in this House must therefore reflect our responsibility to dismantle the structural inequalities inherited from apartheid and to open the doors of opportunity for every learner in South Africa envisaged in the Freedom Charter. The democratic state carries a duty to ensure that every child, regardless of geographical location or class, gains access to the skills, knowledge, and support required to participate meaningfully in society and the economy. That is why today's debate is not merely about pass marks. It is about the future of our youth, the strength of our labor market, and the direction of our country's developmental trajectory. I am today reminded of the timeless words of former president of the ANC Youth League, Anton Lembede, who said, I quote, "A man may gain the highest university degrees and diplomas, but he is not better than a well-trained and industrious farmer or carpenter. A leader in agriculture or carpentry is just as good as a leader in politics, science, education, and arts," close quotation. These words reflect the ANC long-standing belief that all reforms, all forms of work, all forms of skill, and all pathways to success deserve dignity and recognition. They remind us that our education system must not only prepare our learners for university, but also equip them with practical skills, vocational expertise, and the capacity to contribute meaningfully to our economy and society. Honorable members, the conversation about minimum pass requirement must never be isolated from the broader imperative diversifying educational pathways. This is in line with ANC resolution and our manifesto commitments to strengthen multiple pathways that cater to varied learner capabilities and economic needs. The three-stream model reflects the ANC's belief in inclusive development and in the necessity of producing a workforce capable of supporting industrial expansion, technological advancement, and economic restructuring. The ANC government, through Department of Education and Department of Basic Education, continues to drive alignment between schooling and post-schooling education and training ecosystem. This includes curriculum modernization, work-based learning, rationalization of the TVET colleges, and expanded entrepreneurship development, and the phasing out of outdated or underperforming programs. By removing programs that no longer serve learners or labor market, we ensure that resources are focused on high-impact, relevant training that equips young people with skills demanded by a modern technology-driven economy. Collaboration between the Department of Basic Education and Higher Education, SETAs, industries, and institutions of higher learning remains central to this work. Such cooperation ensures curriculum relevance, improves career guidance, enhances learner readiness, and bridges the persistent skills mismatch that undermines economic growth. At the same time, reforms aligns with fourth industrial revolution demands and the sectoral needs, preparing learners for a rapidly changing labor market. Honorable members, it is important to reiterate that TVET colleges and city institutions are not secondary options. They are the engines of industrial capability and social mobility, uniquely positioned to support the skills required for a transforming economy. On Tuesday, Minister Buti Manamela opened the Northlink College Belleville Boilmaker campus here in Cape Town, a concrete demonstration of our commitment to strengthening artisan training. These skills are essential to energy security, infrastructure development, manufacturing, and shipping, all primary pillars of economic reconstruction. Let us also be clear, a bachelor's pass does not guarantee university admission. Universities assess admission point score, commonly known as APS, program requirements, and capacity constraints. Differentiated NSCA passes must therefore be understood as reflecting different competencies for different pathways, all of which are legitimate and necessary in a diversified economy. Strengthening minimum pass requirements must go hand in hand with strengthening quality and readiness of post-schooling education and training. This includes addressing capacity constraints, upgrading infrastructure, building digital skills, and aligning curriculum with the fourth industrial revolution competencies and labor market demands, which are core principles of both the National Democratic Revolution and the ANC manifesto. We commend ongoing initiatives such as TVET college infrastructure upgrade, workplace-based learning projects, and the targeted interventions to expand access to higher education and vocational training, all of which prepare learners for meaningful participation in the economy. Career guidance and mentorship programs must be expanded urgently. Too many learners complete grade 12 without clarity on opportunities or pathways. That is why as the ANC, we emphasize the expansion of structured advisory services, workplace exposure and transitional support. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC remains firm that reforms in the NSC must advance equity, quality, transformation, and developmental relevance. These principles are not only symbolic, but they are the engine room of our national progress. As I conclude, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, let us be guided by the conviction that has shaped the ANC for over a century, that the future of our country depends on the opportunities we create for its youth. Strengthening the NSC diversity pathways, aligning curriculum with economic demands, and ensuring meaningful transition into PSET and work are not optional reforms. They are obligation placed upon us by history, by our people, and by the Freedom Charter. As I move, I thank you as the ANC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Sharif. Is the Honourable Sharif on the platform?
Yes, I am, House Chairperson. Apologies about that. Thank you, House Chair. Honourable members, South Africa deserves a clear, honest and evidence-based conversation about learner achievement, not sound bites or misrepresentation, and certainly not the kind of sloganeering that reduces a complex education system to the myth of a 30% pass mark. Let us start with the facts, because without facts, we cannot bring meaningful change. The Minister has clarified repeatedly and again in her parliamentary replies today that no learner can pass matric with 30% in all their subjects. This is simply false. The National Senior Certificate is not a flat pass mark. It is a layered system with 3 levels of achievement: bachelor's, diploma, and higher certificate. Each has its own set of requirements. As mentioned earlier, a bachelor's pass, for example, requires a minimum of 50% in at least 4 subjects, 40% in home languages, and passing 6 out of 7 subjects. These are not symbolic thresholds. This is setting real academic expectations. And last year, out of 724,000 candidates, only 189 learners achieved the minimum pass requirements. The idea that South Africa has lowered standards by allowing learners to pass with 30% is not only inaccurate, it distracts from the real issues that demand this House's attention. Honourable members, this debate is not about a number. It is about the quality of our entire education system. Raising the minimum pass mark to 50% for every subject without first fixing the foundation would not suddenly produce better outcomes. It would simply produce more dropouts. Without the necessary teacher training, instructional time, better materials, stronger assessment, and literacy support, a symbolic increase will collapse, not strengthen the system. And here is the fundamental truth. Quality does not come from raising the bar. It comes from raising the floor. This is exactly why Minister Gwagube has placed foundational learning at the center of the reform agenda. Because if a child cannot read for meaning by grade 4, the question of their eventual matric pass mark is already decided. They are already behind. They are already excluded from opportunities before they even reach the senior phase. This is the real crisis. The Minister has been clear that improvement starts where learning begins, in early childhood development, in reading instruction, in numeracy mastery, in teaching support, and in the quality of what happens in the first 1,000 days of schooling. This is why it is important to strengthen literacy programs, improve reading benchmarks, scaling early learning improvements, and investing in teacher development specific to the foundation phase. Strengthening standards require more than just political will. It requires credible, expert-driven advice. And here, the Minister has acted decisively. The National Education and Training Council has been established precisely to guide South Africa through this next era of education reform. The NETC is a statutory advisory council of experts established to provide the Minister with evidence-based recommendation on curriculum, progression, assessment, and international best practice. Its work is grounded in the National Education Policy Act, and its mandate is specific: to advise on reforms that will meaningfully strengthen learning outcomes, especially in public schools serving our poorest communities. The minister's due process in appointing the 15 members of the council ensured that the NETC's work begins from a place of legitimacy and expertise. This work will include reviewing past requirements, but not in isolation. The guiding question is not whether 30% or 50% sounds better. The question, the real one, is whether our current requirements prepare learners for success after school. And if they do not, what systematic changes will? This is the serious work that must replace headline politics. Let us also speak about credibility. Credibility of the NSC, credibility of the assessment system, and credibility of what we tell the public. Part of what builds credibility is having our examinations externally moderated, quality assured, standardized, and benchmarked. What undermines credibility is not the past requirement. It is the persistent challenge of weak foundational literacy, inconsistent teaching quality, and socioeconomic barriers that too often predetermine a learner's outcome. This is where the minister's reforms are focused, and that is where the energy of this House should be directed. Raising standards is not a one-day announcement. It must be long-term, disciplined, and evidence-based project. South Africans are rightly demanding quality, but quality will not come through shock announcements or arbitrary changes. It will come through doing the difficult work. Fixing early literacy, supporting teachers, protecting teaching time, delivering materials on time, strengthening school management, improving assessments, and aligning our curriculum to what the world expects and what our learners deserve. Not shortcuts, not slogans, not easy headlines, but real reform. And so today, let us give the public the clarity they deserve. The minister is defending real, achievable, sustainable improvement. She is defending the principle that you cannot change outcomes by changing a number. You cannot change outcomes. You can only change outcomes by changing the system. Let us raise the floor. Let us strengthen the foundation, and let us build an education system that prepares every South African child, not just for an examination, but for life. We would like to acknowledge the matriculants who wrap up their exams and prepare for the next chapter of their lives. We wish them all the best, and we count on them to take this country from strength to strength. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Low.
Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, the African National Congress welcomed this debate at a decisive moment for South Africa, a moment that will determine not only the pace of our economic recovery, but also the prospects of our youth and the strength of our nation. As we assess the state of our education system, we do so with a clear commitment to closing institutional gaps and strengthening oversight so that our system can deliver on its constitutional and developmental mandate. The ANC has consistently affirmed that education remains the most powerful instrument for liberation in economic advancement and nation building. It is on this foundation that we engage this important discussion. A central challenge facing our system is the state of foundational learning. Too many children begin their education without adequate cognitive preparation, nutrition, or early learning support. Strengthening early childhood development is therefore not just desirable, it is essential to breaking cycles of poverty and setting children on a path toward meaningful opportunity. If the earlier stage is weak, every stage that follows is compromised. The ANC remains firm that ECD must receive targeted investment, professionalization, and integrated support if we are to improve long-term educational outcomes. Another agent concern is the persistent underperformance in STEM subjects. A competitive, inclusive economy depends on learners equipped with science, technology, and mathematics skills. Without strengthening these areas, our economic transformation agenda will continue to be constrained. We must expand teacher development programs, upgrade laboratories and digital resources, and ensure that curriculum reforms are implemented effectively and efficiently. This is not a sectoral issue. It is a national priority that seeks directly to growth, innovation, and future employment. Honourable members,
Gender equality in education demands sustained intervention. Although access to schooling has improved, many girls still face barriers that undermine their participation and achievement, including unsafe school environments, limited sanitary dignity support, and restricted pathways into critical subjects. Addressing gender inequality is quite cardinal to development. Empowering the girl child strengthens families, communities, and the country. Our oversight and policy actions must ensure that every girl is safe, supported, and encouraged to pursue opportunities across the full spectrum of the curriculum. As parliamentarians, we carry the responsibility to ensure that education systems functions effectively and adheres to the constitutional obligations. This includes exercising robust oversight of reforms to the National Senior Certificate minimum pass requirements. Oversight must be purposeful, evidence-driven, and orientated towards strengthening institutions. It is not about punishment. It is not about ensuring delivery. When oversight is exercised consistently and constructively, implementation improves, inefficiencies are addressed, and learners are supported rather than penalized. We must deepen monitoring mechanism, ensure policy alignment, and demand accountability at all levels, from national departments to school governing bodies, to guarantee that any changes in the National Senior Certificate policy advance equity and educational quality. A capable and developmental education system requires stable and strategic investment. School needs skills educators, safe infrastructure, digital access, and learner support services that address social and academic needs. Progressive budgeting must be protected so that historical disadvantaged communities receive the resources required to overcome inequality. And education should never be viewed as a cost. It is a long-term investment in South African social and economic resilience. The ANC remains committed to ensuring that allocations reflect this priority. Transformation is sustainable only when society participates actively. Learners, parents, teachers, unions, and civil societies are co-producers of educational outcomes. When communities are meaningful, involved, accountability strengthens, and policy becomes more responsive. This principle is critical in the context of the National Senior Certificate reforms. Ongoing consultations ensures that minimum pass requirements are implemented fairly, reflect the realities of learners, and not exacerbated inequality. Education is not only about throughput rates or stats. It is about the society we seek to build. A developmental, value-based education system cultivates ethical leadership, social responsibility, respect, and unity. These values are quite important and significant to sustaining democracy and advancing national cohesion. We must nurture young people who are confident, critically engaged, and future-focused young people who can drive innovation and uphold the principles of our Constitution. Honourable members, the work before us is quite fundamentally about building foundations for the future generations. As President Mwalimu Julius Nyerere could have said, he reminds us that while others search for wealth and power, we in Africa must lay firm foundations. For without strong foundations, nothing lasting can be built. Strengthened oversight, inclusive participation, strategic investment, and values-driven commitment to transformative education are the tools that will allow us to lay those firm foundations. Through them, we can ensure that every learner benefits from the National Senior Certificate reforms, that our schools are strengthened, and that our nations move forward with a confidence and purpose.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Maimane.
Thank you, House Chairperson, and thank you to all the members who have contributed to this debate. I want to take cue from Honourable Nontenja in what she said. She said, setting higher standards can be the spark for reform. This debate is not about standards only. It is, of course, about saying when you heighten the bar, Honourable Nestle, you can invite young people, black people, poor people to be able to compete at a higher level. If I make a decision today to say I want to go compete in the Olympics and I want to run 100 meters, the standard there is 10 seconds for the 100 meters. I can't say, well, I haven't eaten well, I haven't slept, I didn't grow up in a good neighborhood, therefore adjust the standards and make them 15 seconds. No. It is about saying, if I know it's 10%, best I start doing all the reforms we have discussed on this platform, honourable members. And so if we want an education that prepares, that competes with nations, all the Asian nations have already moved their pass standards to over 50%. Kenya has moved its pass mark to 35% and is moving progressively up. The debate is not binary in that saying doing one, which is raising the pass standard, is cancelling the other. It is raising the pass standard so that the teacher, the learner, all wake up in the morning knowing what the scoreboard is. You can't say you are doing all of these things, curriculum design, etc., in the hope that whatever you achieve is what you are hoping for in the first place. That is a false way of analysis. We must set the standards higher, ask ourselves what we want to achieve, who we are competing with, and begin to do all the changes. Because the proof is in the pudding, and here is the pudding. We now have over 8 million learners who are in needs, who are unemployed, who are not in education, who are not in training. We have the highest level of the people who are unemployed don't have a matric. And so ultimately, honorable members, this is not just about this 30% issue. It's about saying when we set higher standards, we can expect better of ourselves and better as a nation. So I ask all the parties and all the members to support this motion to introduce reform so our nation can be better served. I thank you, House Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, that concludes the debate on this item. I will now hand over to the Honorable Labuschagne, who will preside over the second item of this mini-plenary session. The Honorable Labuschagne.
Thank you, Honorable Frorik. The last item in the order paper is a subject for the discussion in the name of Honorable B S Masango on solutions to address the severe malnutrition crisis, confronting past failures to coordinate and implement critical interventions to protect children from hunger. The Honorable B S Masango.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. If every child in South Africa was given the basic of food, safety, and a chance to grow, our nation would look very different. We would develop a generation of children that are able to learn, think, and participate fully in the economy. But today, we face a reality of too many of our children trapped in a cycle of hunger, not because their parents don't care, but because the systems meant to protect them are failing. 1 in 4 children under 5 is stunted. That means they are not just short in height, they are short of the nutrients needed for their brains and bodies to flourish. They are living on the edge, and one more hardship push them over to the edge into severe malnutrition. This crisis did not happen overnight. It has grown because for years our efforts have been fragmented, underfunded, and uncoordinated. We have poured money into programs, but not always into the places and ages where it matters most. We start too late, we monitor too little, and we do not always put the right tools in the right hands. And while we talk, children are dying. But we are not here to lament. We are here to take responsibility, to confront the past, and to build a different future. Starting now, we can end child malnutrition, but we will need a whole of society approach. The DG Marais Trust recommends 3 main goals in tackling malnutrition: make protein-rich foods affordable, stop babies being born too small, and strengthen families and communities to feed themselves. These goals align with the Democratic Alliance's own social development policy, which proposes addressing malnutrition by pegging the child support grant at the food poverty line, extending the child grant to include learners who are still attending school over the age of 18 until they complete their national senior certificate, extending the child grant to cover pregnant mothers to support child nutrition goals, using food hubs to reduce food insecurity and malnutrition, and strengthening the link between community outreach programs with healthcare services. Malnutrition is not simply halted by enough food, but with enough nutritious food, and the journey to healthy children start with ensuring that their pregnant mothers are not malnourished malnourished. Malnourished mothers give birth to small babies who then face a lifelong struggle to catch up. But we can change this trajectory. We can do so by supporting pregnant women, especially those at risk. A maternal support grant, essentially giving the child support grant earlier during pregnancy, will help mothers eat better, attend clinics, and breastfeed. We need to work together. There are vibrant NGOs and communities growing food across our country, but their efforts are scattered. If we connect extension services with these community initiatives, we can create local food hubs that provide fresh produce to households and early learning centers. This grows dignity, not dependency. Honorable Chairperson, our Constitution promises every child the right to basic nutrition, not a dream, not a slogan, a right, and rights demand action. Yet today, the Food and Nutrition Security Council is yet to live up to the promise. Departments act in silos. The result is predictable and unacceptable. We need the Council to coordinate government, civil society, and business to drive a single, bold national program. Without leadership, plans remain paper. With leadership, they become food in a child's stomach. Let me end with this, Honorable Chairperson. A malnourished child carries more than hunger. They carry a stolen future, but a nourished child carries whose body and mind are allowed to grow is unstoppable. That child becomes a learner, a worker, a parent, and a citizen who lifts others. Let us no longer be a nation where child hunger is normal. Let us become the generation that said enough and they meant it. Our children are waiting and history is watching. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Minister of Social Development.
It is
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, and fellow South Africans. Thank you, Honorable Bridget Masango, our chairperson, for bringing forward this important debate on a crucial issue at a crucial time. Studies have shown that the first 5 years of a child's life is the most critical of a human development. According to UNICEF 2021, a child's brain forms more than 1 million neutral connections every second during this period, laying the groundwork of a child's academic, emotional, and physical well-being throughout the life. During this period, good nutrition is a key pillar and strong predictor of future success and well-being. It is for this reason that as soon as it came into office, the ANC-led government expanded the social assistance program to tackle widespread poverty and hunger, which disproportionately affected Black communities. This is a historical fact, and no amount of whitewashing or attempt to do so will erase it. If we do not tell this truth about our past, truth will have no real meaning in this country. We will continue to tell this painful truth, not because we want to guilt trip anyone, but to contextualize the past, to understand the present, and to shape the future we want. Section 27(1)(b) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa states that, I quote, "Everyone has the right to have access to sufficient food and water." This obligation is extended in Section 27.2, according to which the state must take reasonable legislative and other measures within its available resources to achieve the progressive realization of each of these rights. The social assistance program is, without any shadow of doubt, South Africa's most important anti-hunger program. In an average month, this program, and an average of more than 28 million vulnerable individuals and households to afford a nutritional adequate diet. No amount of political grandstanding can change one undeniable fact that this is the most extensive and responsive anti-poverty program that provides the much-needed income support during and after economic downturns. This program has transformed the lives of millions of South Africans, protecting many vulnerable individuals and households from hardship and hunger. In 1998, government introduced the Child Support Grant to end the cycle of malnutrition and address the nutritional needs of children in South Africa. This grant was the first that was targeted at children from 0 to 7 years, but has since been gradually expanded to cover all eligible children under the age of 18 years. Currently, Child Support Grant reaches over 13 million children in South Africa and has been found to increase food consumption and directly diversity in vulnerable households. In fact, our social assistance program is recognized globally as the most effective pro-growth poverty reduction strategy. Additionally, research conducted by UNICEF and the World Bank show that Child Support Grant has multiplied itself as it significantly improves health, education, well-being of as well as shield vulnerable households from adverse economic effects. In the past 3 decades, South Africa has made real progress in tackling child malnutrition. We are not oblivious, Honorable Chair, to the fact that progress is unfinished. The recent findings by the South African Human Rights Commission is a case in point. We have therefore wasted no time or spent any effort to address this issue because we strongly believe that our nation's greatness should not be measured by numbers of the wealth of its allies and their fancy toys, but rather by the dignity afforded to the most vulnerable amongst us at the most crucial stages of their life. Delivering the State of the Nation address in early February this year, President Cyril Ramaphosa highlighted that some of the country's gains in reducing child poverty and mortality since 1994 are now slowing down. There is thus more urgent than tackling malnutrition, which is rearing its ugly head in some parts of our country, especially predominantly rural areas. This was amplified at the height of COVID-19 pandemic, exacerbated by the rising cost of living and climate-related disaster. I must, however, hasten to add that this issue is not restricted to South Africa. It is now a shared global phenomenon, with the World Food Programme sounding. Other countries such as Syria, Nicaragua, Nigeria, and Nepal are also feeling the pinch. Through measures such as mandatory fortification of staple foods like rice, maize meal, household food gardens, social assistance programs, this administration continues to wage an unrelenting war against malnutrition and hunger on all fronts. At the center of our work to address poverty and hunger in the NTP 2030 and the MTTP, both of which provide a clear path to build in the progress we have in the past 30 years in addressing malnutrition. The drivers of acute food insecurity are habitually complex, interlinked, and mutually reinforcing. The alarming rise in teenage pregnancy combined with rising cost of living, the growing climate crisis, and frequent extreme weather events are currently common causes of rising levels of hunger and malnutrition. These factors erode the resilience of households and communities to respond, threatening livelihoods and leaving them more vulnerable to additional shocks. One of the most important interventions which are part of the 100 Days campaign, which stems from recognition that malnourished mothers give birth to malnourished babies, passing hunger from one generation to the other. We have also adopted an integrated approach to nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitivity interventions to prevent malnutrition. We provide cooked nutrition food to vulnerable household, community nutrition and development centers across South Africa. In addition, we are rolling out the nutrition assessment and counseling, through which we capacitated households to grow nutrition-rich crops and adopt climate-resilient subsistence farming agriculture practices. In 2022, the department, through cabinet, introduced this Child Support Grant top-up that currently reaches over 29,000 vulnerable children to the tune of over 18 million rand. The highest number of children currently benefiting from the child support grant top-up are in the province of the Eastern Cape. Additionally, we provide school uniforms to learners from vulnerable families through SRD programs, effectively removing the barriers that prevent them from remaining in and finishing their basic education schooling years. As Utata Matiba said, education is most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Other members will embellish further on the impact of our school-based nutrition and educational interventions, including school nutrition program and clinical and community-based nutritional interventions to address severe acute malnutrition. Through community-based interventions such as RISIHA, we are focusing on early intervention, focusing on children most at risk malnutrition, and ensuring that no child is left behind from progress to end poverty and malnutrition. We are also intensifying the rollout of iCrop, focusing on underprivileged and rural communities across the country. This year alone, we have set aside 29 million rand to conduct 516 iCrops. We have also partnered with the Home Affairs to promote early birth registration. In this financial year alone, we've already visited 5 out of 9 provinces, bringing services closer to our people. Honorable members, if there's a single cause that must unite all of us across the party line, is to end malnutrition in all its form. As I close, Honorable Chair, I must emphasize that preventing hunger and malnutrition is everyone's business. We must transform South Africa's food system to ensure that the purpose is not just to feed people, but to nourish everyone. In this regard, we must all be active in defining what food should be produced and how, and most importantly, reduce costs and minimize waste. Equally, we must educate our constituencies to make more informed dietary choices. Preventing and treating malnutrition will remain a core part of the DSD portfolio mandate. We take this matter seriously. No one can diminish in any way or ignore the important work we've and continue to do in tackling hunger and malnutrition up to this point. Let me take this opportunity and thank you for participating in this debate. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. The MK Party, Honorable Mutama.
Thank you, Chair. It's Member Davids. I will speak on behalf of Honorable Mchombo. Good day, Honorable Members, Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister. I rise today to speak on a matter fundamental to our nation's future, the nourishment of our children through the National School Nutrition Program and the comprehensive nutrition intervention that must accompany it. The National School Nutrition Program stands as one of the government's most successful interventions in breaking the cycle of poverty and inequality. Over 9 million learners across more than 20,000 schools receive daily meals through this program. These are not merely statistics, they represent children who arrive at school hungry, children whose ability to learn depends on whether they have eaten that day. Research confirms that we instinctively know hungry children cannot learn effectively. The NSNP has demonstrated measurable impact on school attendance rates, with participating schools recording reduction in absenteeism. When children know they will receive a nutrition meal at school, they come to school. For many learners in impoverished communities, the school meal is their only reliable source of nutrition each day. Honorable Chairperson, beyond attendance, we observe improved academic performance among learners receiving consistent nutrition support. Cognitive function, concentration, and memory, all essential for learning, depend on adequate nutrition. It directly impart to the development. We When we feed children properly, we unlock the potential to learn, to grow, and to contribute to our nation's development. However, honourable members, we must acknowledge that quantity alone does not guarantee quality. Our current challenge extends beyond providing meals to ensuring those meals contain the balance, macronutrition, and essential macronutrients that growing children require. Too often, school meals consist primarily of carbohydrate, which insufficient with insufficient protein, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals. We must improve the nutrition content of school meals through better menu planning, diverse food sources, and fortification strategies that address the specific micronutrition deficiencies prevalent in our child population. Furthermore, nutrition support must follow a seamless continuum from early childhood development facilities through the school years. I commend the increase in subsidy from 17 rand to 24 rand per child per day. Significant steps towards ensuring adequate nutrition support. This increase enables procurement of more nutritious ingredients and better meal preparation. However, we must ensure that subsidy reaches ECD facilities effectively and that the transition from ECD to primary school maintains consistent nutrition support without gaps that could compromise children's development. Honourable members, education itself must become our ally in this fight against malnutrition. We cannot simply feed children, we must teach them about nutrition, or equipping them with knowledge that they will carry throughout their lives. I propose strengthening our nutrition education curriculum through age-appropriated content integrated across subjects. Young learners should understand basic food groups and healthy choices. Healthy choices. Older learners should learn meal planning, food preparation, and nutrition literacy that empower them to make informed decisions about their health. This curriculum integration required educators equipped to deliver nutrition education effectively. Therefore, we must prioritize teachers' training programs that enable educators to understand nutrition's roles in child development and learning. Teachers are on the front lines. They observe children daily and can identify early warning signs of malnutrition. Through proper training, educators can recognize.
Honourable Davis, will you please just take your chair for a moment? You are a speaker from the ANC. You started out to say you are speaking in whose place?
In the first speaker of the ANC's place, the one that you called for, Chair.
No, I called for the MK speaker. I called for the MK speaker, Njama.
And now you said to, oh, sorry, Chair. I thought I had you said to on.
The next ANC speaker is Honourable Klong.
Yes, I was also speaking. Yeah.
Sorry?
I represent Honourable Klong, Honourable House Chair.
Okay, so
I'm Honourable Munyai.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for that one.
You are not, yeah. I am very sorry that I only stopped you now. I had to confirm that you are not an MK speaker. Will you please just,
thank you.
Thank you. And I call on the MK speaker now, Honourable Njama. I am sorry, maybe I pronounced your surname wrongly. MK speaker?
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of Mkhonto Wesizwe today to recognize that white farmers and the food retail sectors are busy with food genocide against Black children. A shocking 12,000 children die annually from lack of food in South Africa. This is anti-Ubuntu carnage shall be stopped by an MK government which shall put people before profits. Only MK shall end the food genocide that murders our children for profit. There is an evil alliance between the food retail sector and the agricultural sector in South Africa. This evil alliance respects only money. This axis of evil destroys 33% of food annually. This is done to keep profits up. At the same time, nearly 1,000 children die annually from acute malnutrition, while malnutrition is an underlying cause in the total of nearly 11,000 children deaths per year. So we're talking 12,000 deaths of children a year from lack of food, yet the retail and agricultural sector destroys massive amounts of food annually. There are testimonies of tomatoes being buried in big holes and milk poured in rivers by farmers. What explains this cruel anomaly? Destroying food while children die from lack of food. It's profit before people. The food retail sector contributes about 20% to the GDP. That's trillions in rand value. To keep up profits, the food can't be made accessible to all, because that will disturb the logic of capitalism, where profits are driven by scarcity through the capitalist logic of supply and demand. If demand is high and supply is low, it's good for profits because it drives prices up. So the hand of capitalists interfere with the market to market forces to create demand by destroying food to realize artificial scarcity. It is calculated that over 30% of food in the retail sector is destroyed annually, yet children die from malnutrition. This is an evil system. The South African agricultural and retail sectors are driven by this vampirish capitalistic logic, which considers money a godlike entity. And in pursuit of money, lives means nothing, more so if it's Black children's lives. The South African white monopoly owned agriculture and retail sectors can be legitimately called evil, vampiristic, and genocidal tendencies. But also, they are racist. The children dying from hunger are Black children, so their lives don't matter. The same agricultural and retail sectors clock massive profits from food businesses, where 63% of the population is food insecure, according to the South African Human Rights Commission. 63% of our people are without food. These children dying from malnutrition are from those households who suffer food insecurity in the midst of plenty. Another cruel anomaly is the fact that the South African agricultural sector exports food while children die of hunger in South Africa. In the first quarter of 2024, the South African agricultural exports were valued at 58 billion rands. The logic of the South African agricultural sector is racist. It was built out of double violence of land theft and violence of labor super exploitation. We do well to remember that Black people who work on farms are virtual slaves up to this day. These are the real producers of food in this country, and yet we know they are the most hungry. Basically, the South African agricultural paradigm is one of systematic racist violence. That is why up to now, white farmers kill Black farm workers so easily, including feeding their bodies to pigs. How many stories we hear a white farmer mistakenly killing black person and claiming that they were shooting an animal. A further manifestation of the violent nature of the colonial white settler agricultural sector is the systemic poisoning of the nation through genetically modified crops. 90% of our maize we eat a stable diet is genetically modified. Countries which respect the health of their nations have banned GMO foods. It is not food, it is poison. To end the carnage created by the restrictive logic of agricultural sector, a new paradigm must be imposed. It starts with Ubuntu, notion of sharing the land. That is what the MK party promotes. There is no ending food insecurity within the colonial land owning patterns. The land must be shared more equitably by returning it to its rightful owners. That's why MK party is calling for land expropriation without compensation. Secondly, we must destroy the socially and environmentally violent agricultural paradigm and replace it with a more humane, Ubuntu-driven agriculture and food redistribution paradigms. We must move away from GMO and killer pesticides and to more organic indigenous knowledge system informed paradigms of agriculture and food redistribution systems. The principle of Ubuntu and equity must inform the entire food value chain. In this way, we heal the soil and develop more humane social relations and will protect and feed our children good, nutritious, healthy food. We must put people before profits. Only an Umkhonto we Sizwe government can go against the evil agricultural and retail sectors which allow our children to die while they make profits. An MKP shall stop food being sent back to Europe whilst our people suffer from hunger. An MKP government shall declare hunger a crime against humanity, and all shall eat under an MK government. Thank you.
Thank you. The DA, Honorable Dr. Leroux.
Honourable House Chair, today's debate about malnutrition is important because when infants die of starvation, it is clear that as a country, we are failing the most vulnerable and the most precious members of our society, our children. The fact that 155 children have died of severe malnutrition in the first 4 months of 2025 is simply heartbreaking. I can remember the helplessness I felt as a young doctor in the Eastern Cape when terribly ill babies with kwashiorkor or marasmus, the severest forms of malnutrition, arrived at the hospital I was working at. Despite following excellent malnutrition protocols, it was usually too late and up to a third of children died. However, there is a much bigger problem lurking just under the surface, which most parents and healthcare workers are completely unaware of, namely chronic mild to moderate malnutrition. Because mild to moderate cases of malnutrition are far more common, they actually represent a much greater share of the tragedy of malnutrition. In fact, mild to moderate malnutrition is the underlying cause of half of South Africa's under 5 deaths, meaning nearly 20,000 deaths in South Africa in 2023. Further, chronic mild malnutrition results in children not growing as tall as they should be, which is called stunting, which harms their intellectual development and undermines school achievement and future earning capacity. And although malnutrition rates have decreased in South Africa over the past 20 years, stunting remains remarkably high at about 28%, which means that more than a quarter of South African children will not reach their full potential because of an inadequate intake of the right quantity, but more importantly, the right quality of food. The problem with mild to moderate malnutrition is that unless we look for it, it remains invisible. Quiet, persistent, and devastating to millions of children across South Africa, shaping lives, limiting potential, and undermining national progress. Honourable members, it's also important to recognise that malnutrition is not confined to childhood. Its repercussions stretch across the entire life course and indeed across generations. Starting at birth, Children born with low birth weight begin life with a significant disadvantage. Low birth weight is often a consequence of hypertension, infection, inadequate maternal nutrition, smoking, alcohol use, and inadequate maternal care. Low birth weight is a strong predictor of later malnutrition and stunting, poor learning outcomes, and even adult diseases such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, and hypertension. This intergenerational pattern of malnutrition is well recognized. A girl who is undernourished in childhood is likely to become a shorter adult, who is more vulnerable in pregnancy and more likely to deliver a low birth weight infant, and thus the cycle begins again. Understanding nutrition in this way, spanning generations and shaping lifelong outcomes, has important implications for public policy and the way we respond to and fight malnutrition. The causes of malnutrition are complex and operate at interconnected levels. At the societal level, poverty, inequality, corruption, geographical barriers, and environmental degradation all have an impact. Where women lack autonomy, where criminals run amok, where there are no jobs or where essential services are lacking, malnutrition inevitably follows. At the household level, the key factors include access to nutritious food, knowledge of good feeding and caring practices, sanitation, and access to good quality primary health care. Even in households where food is present, poor feeding practices, including the use of formula instead of breastfeeding, or lack of support for young mothers, can compromise a child's growth. Clearly, for us to deal with the scourge of malnutrition as a country, we need a whole-of-society approach. Firstly, we need to fight poverty by doing all we can to encourage economic growth through stable fiscal policies and also by removing red tape and job-killing policies like BEE. We need better policies to make sure that we reduce food waste and that excess food from restaurants and retailers can get to the poor and the hungry. Further, we need to educate all South Africans about nutrition and healthy eating, the importance of protein, healthy fats and vegetables. Clearly, eating amagwinya and polony washed down with Twizzler is not good nutritious food for either children or adults. We need to relentlessly promote exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life and educate all South Africans about the incredible benefits of breastfeeding as a way to cement the foundations of a child's health and well-being, and also practically support working women who want to continue breastfeeding even when they return from maternity leave. As I used to say to new mothers in the maternity ward, ubalulekile kakhulu ukuncancisa inyanga ezithandathu ngebele lodwa. Ubisi lwebele lwanele, limnandi, liyakhusela umntwana ngezifo. Now, how can the Department of Health intervene in this crisis of malnutrition? Well, the Department of Health has access to an incredible resource in the form of 45,000 community health workers that look after 250 households each, covering nearly 2/3 of all households in South Africa. Imagine if we use these community health workers effectively to fight malnutrition at the household level. A South African NGO called PLENARY, which is based in Khayelitsha in the rural Eastern Cape, provides a model that could easily be adopted by the Department of Health. In a cluster randomized controlled trial based in Khayelitsha, its Men to Mother program decreased the incidence of children who are underweight for age by 60% and who were stunted by 30%, and found that 75% of children who were born with low birth weight, which is the greatest risk factor for later malnutrition, had a normal weight by the age of 1 year. PLENARY uses community health workers called Men to Mothers who perform daily home visits in their communities to support pregnant mothers and to identify any children under 6 who are malnourished. These community health workers are given simple, robust electronic scales and trained about how to plot the weight of children on growth charts over time and identify children whose growth is faltering, and therefore we are able to identify mild and moderate malnutrition early. By contrast, community health workers employed by provincial departments of health only have access to a mid-upper arm circumference tape, which only identifies severely malnourished children when it is often already too late to help them. The PLENARY community health workers support pregnant mothers throughout their pregnancies and up to when their children are 6 years old, encouraging mothers to enroll in antenatal care early, eat well, get onto ARVs and stop drinking and smoking. Mothers are visitors within a few days of delivering and supported in their breastfeeding, while babies are regularly weighed to ensure that they are thriving. Babies who are born with low birth weight are followed up especially closely. This proven model would require training and significant investment, and every community health worker would need to be provided with a simple electronic scale. But this could dramatically impact the incidence of malnutrition in South Africa. If we use a whole-of-society approach, as well as the specific interventions mentioned above, we can banish malnutrition from our society. Failure to act will be costly, morally, socially, and economically. But with prioritization of malnutrition and strategies to use our vast army of community health workers, we can break the cycle of malnutrition and ensure that every child, regardless of where they are born, can grow to their full potential and have the chance to lead a healthy, productive life. I thank you.
Thank you. EFF, Honorable Shirwa Mpongosi.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Stella Malema, the officials, commissars, fighters, and all supporters and sympathizers of the economic emancipation movement. In 2021, deployed by the EFF in the Eastern Cape in Kokama, harrowing reality of and hungry children confronted us. I saw with my eyes young children who looked 2 years old at eye value, but their speech and mannerism development highlighted that they were a few years older than that. The shock cemented with every confirmation that they were indeed much older than what they looked. It was apparent that there was a crisis in this community, in all the 6 wards in that sub-region, in the Eastern Cape, in South Africa. Our children are hungry. They are stunted for themselves. February 2025, a 9-year-old boy, Alti Willard, scavenges through bins looking for food together with his father to simmer down the vicious growls of hunger. He finds poison instead and dies. It must be noted with the utmost truth that our children being hungry to the point of death is man-made. This country has money to buy Lamborghinis for tender thugs. It has money to start and not finish infrastructure projects, to find Dubai visits of comrades and their girlfriends, money for kickbacks, and more than enough money in pala-pala couches that could literally bring an end to our children dying to hunger. So no, we don't have a resource issue. We have a political leadership crisis, a greed catastrophe, a crisis of leaders who think being at the helm of leadership signals their opportunity to eat while our children die because of hunger. We have a crisis of capitalism. Child malnutrition is where a country that fails to care for the weakest amongst us. A country with government that oversees little lives dissipating to thin air because it fails to make reality the very laws we draft in this house. Food insecurity affects 63% of households in this country. Food insecurity is directly linked to child malnutrition. Over 2.7 million children under the age of 6 in this country live in homes that are unable to cater to their nutritional needs, and to this effect, over 28% of our children suffer from chronic undernutrition. This is a crisis beyond our children being below their expected height. In fact, the situation has worsened during the Ramaphosa presidency, with over 15,000 children requiring hospitalization in 2022-2023 because of severe malnutrition. Our child grants are just not sufficient to carry the cost of the child, dressing them and ensuring that they have adequate resources to function in society and to thrive. Home Affairs must be held accountable for failing to have our children register timelessly, as this affects access to social grants. The National School Nutrition Program must expand its mandate and reach and include, and not just end at 1 meal a day, because it's just not enough. We propose that the minimum standard should be 3 meals per day because the money is there, sadly landing in the hands of criminals who are aided by government officials in stealing from the public purse. The child grant must be increased to mirror the cost of a grocery basket. If 500 rand doesn't sustain any of us in this house beyond 2 days, why do we imagine that it is sufficient to cater for the nutritional needs of a vulnerable child for an entire month? Early childhood development centers must all be registered by the end of this year and receive adequate support and subsidy from the government. Women in food production and agriculture and formal trade must be assisted with labor protections to ensure that they always are able to care for their children. Poor women equal poor children. Economically empowered women result in better care for our children. Perhaps this is the opportune moment to remind this house that access to education for girl children, the right to own land and to have a job for women, the subsidization of ECDs and the education of our children are all socialist victories that occurred because the social insisted to ensure that government and the private sector pay their dues to society. This must be a bold reminder to all socialists that justice for our children will only occur under socialism. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. The IFP, Honorable Markey.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. As the IFP, we thank Honorable Masango for initiating this necessary and difficult debate. When we speak of the severe malnutrition crisis, it goes beyond discussing merely statistics. We are confronting the moral shame of a democratic nation where children die of hunger. This is a profound injustice against the most vulnerable citizens of our precious South Africa. We share the collective grief of every parent, every teacher, and every community leader who witnesses the potential of a child being starved out of existence. The Inkatha Freedom Party acknowledges that past governments created social safety nets, yet the persistence of malnutrition confirmed the systematic failure. Food meant for the vulnerable is wasted through inefficiency or made inaccessible by economic policy. Our focus must shift from diagnosing failure to implementing ethical solutions that are rooted in dignity and self-reliance. For immediate relief, we must strengthen and adapt the existing child support grant system to ensure that resources reach children directly. Too often, grants do not reach the child as intended, with the grandmothers serving as primary carers, while mothers and fathers divert funds for their own benefit or provide only a fraction to the actual caregivers. To address this, the child support grant must be compounded by a dedicated SASSA voucher program specially designed to support vulnerable families and directly tackle child malnutrition. The program must be closely monitored to ensure its intention is achieved, thus placing resources directly into the hands of caregivers and restoring their dignity and agency. We further call for VAT exemption on staple foods, especially vegetables and some starches and proteins, etc., for poor households. This would lower the cost of essential nutrition, of which 1 in 4 South Africans still struggling for access. Malnutrition stunts growth, wealth, health, and erodes productivity. Now, how can we expect a prosperous future when our future leaders are lucky to receive only 2 meals a day? Structurally, resilience must be built from the ground up. With land so rich and vast, the executive should empower traditional leaders to cultivate communal land, thus moving communities towards self-reliance and food sovereignty. Legislation already provides for equitable access to land and tenure security. What is lacked is decisive enforcement. It requires vision and faithful implementation by our officials. The National Development Plan must be accelerated to meet urgent demands. The NDP can serve as a supplementary framework for long-term transformation, but it cannot substitute for the immediate enforcement of laws already passed by Parliament. Finally, no solution can succeed without integrity. We urge the strict reinforcement of zero-tolerance policy on corruption. Every resource, every rand, and every food parcels must reach the children in its intended for. The failure to feed a child is the failure of governments. We must act now to restore their right to life and fulfill our constitutional obligation. Now in the time for South Africans to utilize the grand potential of the land beneath us. I thank you, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is from the PA, Honourable Peter.
Thank you, Speaker. Honourable members, fellow South Africans, we gather in this chamber a symbol of our nation's promise and potential, yet today I speak of a shadow that dims that promise, the severe crisis of child malnutrition that stalks our land. It is a quiet, creeping emergency that stuns the bodies and minds of our next generation, and it is a failure we must confront with courage and clarity. For too long, we have treated the symptoms and not the cause. We have launched feeding schemes and distributed supplements, only to see the same tragic headlines return with grim regularity. These past interventions have been plagued by a fundamental failure to coordinate, to implement with integrity, and to address the root of the problem. We have applied band-aids when what was needed was a cure. It is time for honest analysis of these failures, not to assign blame, but to ensure we never ever repeat the same costly mistakes. The Patriotic Alliance believes the solution is not just in the handouts, but in the hand up. The first and most vital insurance policy for a child's proper nutrition is a parent who can provide for them. Therefore, the most critical intervention against hunger is not in a clinic or school kitchen, but in a thriving economy. This government must make job creation its #1 priority. A stable job provides a family with dignity, with choice, and with the power to put food on their own table. We must unleash the private sector, cut the red tape that strangles small businesses, and create an environment where work is available as well as rewarded. A child's future should not be left to the mercy of state-delivered parcels, but secured by the pride of a parent's paycheck. This is not to say that direct interventions have no place. They are a crucial safety net. The National School Nutrition Program is a vital lifeline for millions of our children, but it must be prioritized and shielded from the inefficiency and corruption that has hollowed out so many well-intended programs. We demand that proper, transparent control measures be put in place, especially in our rural and most vulnerable areas. We need real-time monitoring and severe consequences for any official or contractor who dares to steal food from the mouths of our children. Honourable members, the children suffering from malnutrition are not a statistic. They are our nation's future doctors, teachers, engineers, and leaders. Their potential is being stolen from them before they even have a chance. Let us shift our focus from temporary relief to lasting prosperity. Let us make job creation our national mission, and let us fortify our school nutrition programs with the integrity and efficiency our children deserve. Let the 7th administration be remembered not for the debates we had, but for the generation we saved. Let us give our children their rightful inheritance, a full stomach, a sound mind, and a future filled with hope. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker is from the Freedom Front Plus, Honourable van Staden.
Dankie, huisvoorsitter. Huisvoorsitter, ons moet ophou om eers te wil optree as 'n probleem in 'n krisis ontaard het. En die regering vir nasionale eenheid sal moet toesien dat daar eerder die nodige voorkomingsmaatreëls ingestel moet word alvorens 'n probleem hand uitruk. Soos hulle in Engels sê, prevention is better than cure. En dit is 'n absolute skande dat in 'n moderne wêreld van vandag met alles tot ons beskikking kinders honger moet ly en in 'n desperate pogings om kos en asblikke in die hande te probeer kry, gif aansien vir koeldrank, te drink en dan sterf. Ons behoort nie net ons koppe in skaamte te laat sak nie, maar ons gaan eendag hiervoor verantwoording moet doen. Suid-Afrika vermors jaarliks plus minus tussen 60 miljard tot 61 miljard rand se kos. Plus minus 10 miljoen ton kos word jaarliks in hierdie land vermors. Die vraag is, hoe kan ons in ons volkslied uit volle bors uitsing, God seën Afrika, wat 'n gebedslied is, nie net deur Afrika nie, maar veral in hierdie land, as 'n kerkgesang gebruik word, terwyl ons kinders sterf van honger in ons openbare hospitale en ons hierdie miljoene ton kos vermors. Kos wat ons aan die kon gegee het wat honger is. Kos wat ons aan die land se kinders kon gegee het om te eet. These actions will not go unnoticed, and we will one day be punished for it. It is time that we wake up and start to take action to stop this insanity. In May of this year, the Minister of Health has revealed that since the beginning of this year, 155 children under the age of 5 have died in South African public health facilities with moderate or severe acute malnutrition as an underlying condition. This shocking disclosure revealed that the majority of children affected with this were in Limpopo, Gauteng, and KwaZulu-Natal. Sources also indicate that South Africa faces a triple burden of malnutrition with high rates of stunting, wasting, and overweight in children under 5. Approximately 28% of children under 5 are stunted, 30% are overweight, and 2.5% are wasted. In addition, cases of severe acute malnutrition have increased by 33% between 2020 and 2023, and in 2022, 2.4 per 1,000 children under 5 were diagnosed with severe acute malnutrition. Geagte huisvoorsitter, ons het net een kans om hierdie probleem op te los en dit is tyd vir daadwerklike optrede en dit is nou. Ek dankie.
Baie dankie. The next speaker is from Action SA, Honourable Latlape.
Thank you, House Speaker. It is really disheartening to talk about a new South Africa and we're talking about children that die unnecessarily. Our problem is not a shortage of food. What we have is an absence of human decency. We speak of Ubuntu, but we speak about it as an export commodity. It is something that we are not practicing in our society. The greatest evil in our society remains separateness. It prevails, it is promoted and supported by all of us, including our 3 spheres of government, the executive, the judiciary, and parliament. It also manifests itself in national, local, and provincial government. The new democratic South Africa gives new meaning to when things fall apart, where separateness has been normalized. When we speak about what happens in our schools, our children don't go to those schools. We speak of a different South Africa. It was said in the previous debate that the doors of learning will be open to all, but we have normalized separate doors. We talk about a national democratic revolution and a national development plan, but our outcomes are worse than before. Today, we are the most unequal society in the world. We have just hosted the G20, and the theme was solidarity, equality, and sustainability. We have this problem because none of these things are practiced in our society. These themes do not exist. We have the right to food enshrined in our constitution, but all we have to boast is too much government. You will hear when we speak, we talk about social development, we talk about health. This should be one combined ministry so that it can be efficient. We spend more money on too much government. What we spend on blue light security for officials, deputy ministers, could go a long way to alleviate what we're talking about. So our problems is continued separateness, too much government, indifference for the plight of ordinary people. And basically, we have no skin in the game. We are not building resilient communities. We are making our citizens dependent on grants and handouts from government. We have an education system that does not produce skilled, employable people. And this, what we have, Chair, is not a food crisis, but a values crisis with devastating consequences. We have become too dependent on the state when we are not supporting communities to be self-sufficient. We are not rebuilding communities and families. We've become too individualistic. And then we sit and cry when we see children die from a system that we have created, that we are responsible for. We need to look into ourselves and understand that if we do not break the separateness, this problem will only get worse. Let us have skin in the game. Let us not talk about others. Let us talk about ourselves. I thank you, Chair, and I thank the mover for bringing this topic to the fore. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The ACDP informed us they will not take part in the debate. Anybody from the UDM? Any speaker from the UDM?
Next om te sê, voorsitter, ons stem saam.
The next speaker from, is there anybody from RISE that's going to speak? Then the next speaker is from BOSA, Honorable Mamani.
Baie dankie, voorsitter. Honorable members, I think what the debate underlines today is that we have a serious poverty problem. What has become quite patently clear is the fact that, as I want to argue, that if South Africa only consisted of one race, i.e. just black South Africans, 23% of those South Africans would be living under the lower bound quintile, meaning that their life dependency is on 790 rands per month, ultimately meaning that they spend their lives living on 40 rands per day. Were you to add colored South Africans onto that, the number rises to 40%. This is not baiting one race against another, for surely there are elements of poverty amongst white South Africans or Indian South Africans. So in truth, when we answer this debate, it cannot be linked to the economic impetus of what poverty has done to the people of South Africa. And until we recognize the mother who's boiling leaves to feed her children as an act to try and keep them still at night from long tears, and us as policymakers begin to act, we need the urgency that this matter requires, for poverty is on the rise. Therefore, honorable members, there are a number of issues that I believe we need to raise in order to intervene on this. The first, as I've already begun, we need profound economic growth. We need to see South Africa grow so that those who are in the lower two quintiles can move to the middle and upper quintiles. As BOSA, we've tabled a plan for prosperity because it's not just pro-poor policies, it's pro-growth policies, pro-prosperity policies that are going to drive us out of this. Secondly, we need to ensure that the child grant is expanded to a child in utero. Because what's clear is that mothers who are not eating while pregnant ultimately end up with children who are stunted. And this speaks to the broad conversation about the first 1,000 days of a child. And we continue to argue that until we ensure that there's enough resource for that child while in utero, so that there isn't a delay between birth and when they can register for the child grant, we can ensure our children are eating well. Thirdly, honorable members, I do believe, without doubt, we need the Office of the Child's Rights. In South Africa and in Brazil, you can see nations that have developed have ensured that there are rights for children. And then lastly, I see the Minister of Basic Education is on the debate. If we're going to achieve a level of redress, let's ensure that economic policies like empowerment also drive interventions around poverty and ensure that those who steal from school feeding programs are arrested, dealt with swiftly. I support the motion and I hope that it will gain support, but more than anything, it will gain the required action that ensures that we attend to the question of poverty and hunger in our nation. I thank you.
Thank you. New speaker from ATM. The next speaker for the ANC, we have been informed that Honorable Muya will speak in the ANC's slot. Honorable Muya.
Honorable House Chairperson, Honorable Minister Tolash, and honorable members. I stand before you today to address an issue that strikes at the very core of our nation's future: the nourishment, health, and the potential of our children. The National School Nutrition Program remains a beacon of hope in our ongoing struggle to break the chains of poverty and inequality. It is a direct implementation of the African National Congress manifesto commitment to strengthen the social protection. We must confront a severe malnutrition crisis that left too many children vulnerable to food insecurity and unprecedented malnutrition. Honorable members, our late veteran Walter Sisulu has said the following, open quote, "In the history of mankind, it is a law of life that problems arise when conditions are there for their solution." I close quote. The ANC-led government provided daily meals through National School Nutrition Program to over 9 million learners. Going forward, we must improve the quality of these meals. There's no doubt, Honorable House Chair, that National School Nutrition Program has demonstrated fundamental, measurable, successful progress in our country. These are not mere numbers. They represent children who arrive at school hungry, whose ability to learn and thrive, and equally depends on whether they ate or they've eaten that day. The scientific research is clear. The studies from the University of Pretoria confirm that hungry children cannot learn. Their cognitive development is directly impaired by a lack of nutrition. But when the National School Nutrition Program works, it works pretty brilliantly. We see measurable improvements and significant reductions in their absenteeism. When children know that they will eat, they will come to school. Honorable House Chairperson, attendance at school is the floor, not the ceiling. We must aim higher. Consistent nutrition support translates into improved academic performance. Adequate nutrition fuels cognitive function, concentration, and memory essential. That is important pillars for learning. House Chairperson, let us champion educational food gardens. They are a powerful, sustainable solution. They provide fresh produce, reduce costs, and serve as a living classroom. A practical example for manifesto vision for climate resilience. Our commitment must be continuous thread, that early childhood development to secondary school. The recent increase in the ECD's subsidies to 24 rands is a vital step forward, aligning our pledge to expand a quality of ECDs. We must ensure that funding translates into better nutrition on the plate with no child left behind. We must act on the ANC manifesto on commitment to radically transform the economy by sourcing diverse, nutritious food from local farmers. This fight requires more than just food. It requires knowledge. We must integrate a strengthened nutrition curriculum into our schools. We must equip our teachers to recognize the signs of malnutrition, stunting, and deficiencies and refer them for help. Furthermore, we must implement systematic growth monitoring in schools. The World Health Organization held this program as a cornerstone for public health. By regularly tracking our children's growth, we get the data that we need to intervene early and target our policies effectively. In final analysis, as Chair, the school gate cannot be the boundary of our efforts. We must engage parents, the primary nutritional gatekeepers. By turning school into community hubs, we connect families to grants and services, building the caring society we promised. Honorable House Chairperson, this is not just about feeding children. It is our single most strategic investment. We are breaking the cycles of poverty, and we are building the healthy, educated workforce for our nation that they need. Let us rise to this challenge with unity, resolve, and urgency. Let us act now. I thank you.
Thank you. The following speaker is from the DA, Honorable Jordan.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Preparing to speak on this topic also reminded me of the story of the Eastern Cape mother, dreadfully desperate and unable to provide for her children who complain of hunger in the evenings. She would boil water in empty pots and pretend she's cooking just to comfort them. Then she would send them to bed and assure them that she will wake them when the food is ready. Finally asleep, the mother would be relieved that they are unaware of their hunger. To say the situation is dire is an understatement of epic proportions. Chair and members, this is the story of hundreds of thousands of South African families today. The scale of this crisis is staggering. 63.5% of South Africans face some form of food insecurity. According to the HSRC, more than 2.7 million children live in households that are unable to meet their nutritional needs. 28.8% of South African children are stunted, meaning that they suffered permanent, irreversible damage in their development due to chronic malnutrition before they even had the chance to grow. From January to April this year alone, 155 children under 5 have died in public hospitals with malnutrition as an underlying condition. These are children who depend on a government that's failing them. For close to 10 million South African learners, the only meal they can count on in a day is the one they receive at school. Schools are a critical source of nutrition. One of the most instrumental tools that we have to fight against hunger is the National School Nutrition Program. This program is funded nationally and implemented by provincial departments of education and intends to be a simple, powerful guarantee that at least every child in a quintile 1 to 3 school should receive a nutritious meal that improves concentration, supports development, learning, and academic performance. In fact, this program is so important that it may have a direct impact on the economy. Feeding a child is not charity. It's a moral imperative and essential for the realization of potential, not only on an individual level, but also at a national scale. A 2019 study estimated that eliminating child malnutrition could have a marked improvement of 9% on South Africa's GDP. But the NSNP continues to be undermined by provincial mismanagement, weak monitoring, and failed coordination in some provinces. The South African Human Rights Commission has repeatedly waved red flags about challenges experienced by the Eastern Cape around meal provision. Administrative and financial issues continue to contribute towards the inability of the Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal provinces to supply meals to learners due to slow payments or transfers towards schools or service providers. Earlier this year, despite their best efforts to sweep their failures under the rug, Gauteng has also been forced to acknowledge slow payments to NSNP suppliers, placing strain on their ability to provide meals to learners. The Eastern Cape, Free State, and Limpopo provinces have reportedly failed to spend a collective 40.1 million rand earmarked for the NSNP in the previous financial year. Chronic supply chain failures and the insistence of maintaining approximately 1,700 suppliers in KwaZulu-Natal perpetuate difficulties in prompt payments and has caused weeks of disruptions to the provision of meals to learners. This is an administrative nightmare while the province is already being placed under Section 18 of the PFMA earlier this year. Their reasoning? The province is rural. Yet the Western Cape, another very large province with schools in rural and remote areas, manages to provide the NSNP efficiently and on time. This proves that with political will and competent leadership, it's possible to manage supply chain for the NSNP effectively. Just last week in a portfolio committee meeting, the Northern Cape has reported that the province served roughly 80,000 fewer learners in Q2 than Q1 of this year, and then attempted to justify this discrepancy by claiming that learners may not have been poor and therefore chose not to eat after their exams. This is an insulting explanation. The DBE has subsequently confirmed to the portfolio committee this week that there are regular challenges with this province when it comes to missed meals, and that this is a tendency of the Northern Cape and could sometimes amount to waste. Teachers in a school in a small rural community of Nababib attest to how God provides when they try to provide meals together from their own pockets during exams, as the provision by the province is insufficient. These failures, payment delays, poor monitoring, inflated supplier lists, weak coordination are avoidable. Mismanagement and incompetence should be dealt with abruptly, and accountability mechanisms must be strengthened. Provincial departments must face consequences when learners miss meals. South African learners cannot wait for provincial education departments to get their act together. A missed meal is a missed opportunity to learn, grow, and survive. The effect of malnutrition and stunting on learning is severe and must be addressed from a young age. Since the department absorbed ECD and with the intake of grade R learners in the schooling system, pressure is potentially bound to arise. This must be anticipated and compensated for over and above the increased per child subsidy. We need to take stock of what works and what doesn't work. The DA supports Minister Gwagube's commitment to reviewing provincial delivery models, stricter supplier vetting, and monitoring and examining distribution approaches that will tighten oversight. The DA welcomes this intervention and encourages fast, firm, and fearless action. Chair, across the country, teachers, parents, and communities have stepped in where government is falling short. The immense contributions and caring hearts of teachers and schools should not be underplayed. Many schools across the country have started community interventions by mobilizing caring parents to provide lunch to learners who will go without, and even meals to kids in their communities from their homes during holidays. I've heard of incredible initiatives where schools have approached civic organizations and the private sector to boost their nutrition programs to be able to conduct extra classes during holidays and provide meals in this time. This, of course, has the effect of improved academic performance, while learners also have the chance to be fed. That it's necessary to call for Parliament to apply the same level of coordination, care, and compassion to the children of our nation is a tragedy. Yet, here we are. Let's confront past failures with honesty, act with urgency, and a solutions-focused approach. Let's do whatever it takes to protect mothers from being forced to cook water in empty pots and send their children to bed hungry to curb the feeling. I thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is from Ogama, Honorable Ishmael Musa.
Honorable House Chair, honorable members, let me begin by acknowledging the leadership in the Department of Social Development, both the ministers, Minister Tolashi, as well as the Deputy Minister, Honorable Hanif Hendricks, and I must say well done for taking charge of this very challenging department. South Africa has made significant strides in addressing hunger, being the first African country to lay the foundation for zero hunger on the continent. The President's initiatives, including the Presidential Jobs Program, have enabled millions to earn money for food. While challenges persist, Al Jamaah's President, the Honorable Hanif Hendricks, has appealed to people to apply for available grants, emphasizing their impact. The World Health Organization reports these grants reduce malnutrition, and the government provides grants from cradle to grave. A unique achievement. It's notable that despite these efforts, there's been a push to take the President, Hanif Hendricks of Al Jamaah, to ethics over his statements. Critics seem to overlook the comprehensive support system in place instead of focusing on perceived shortcomings. This debate surrounding hunger in South Africa appears to be influenced by external agendas, with some aligning themselves with narratives that contradict the country's progress. It's crucial for leaders to prioritize patriotism and constructive dialogue rather than perpetuating divisive rhetoric. As the debate unfolds, it's hoped that a more collaborative and solution-focused approach will emerge, acknowledging the strides made and addressing remaining challenges together. This initiative, signed on 3rd December, includes the sale of 40,000 cultural blankets in the kingdom, with plans to expand to 12 main kingdoms. The royal kingdoms are set to become more prosperous thanks to these efforts. Instead of supporting the President of Al Jamaah, the DA has taken him to ethics, seemingly to demoralize him. Meanwhile, next week, he'll be distributing Christmas cheer hampers to thousands of flood victims and families in need. If grants are used to buy food, no one should starve in South Africa. It's unfortunate the DA leaves this out when speaking on behalf of Al Jamaah. Taking Al Jamaah to ethics is silly and seriously counterproductive. I thank you.
Thank you. Is there any speaker for the NCC? Any speaker from the PIC? The table was informed that the UAT will not participate in the debate. Any speaker from Good? The next speaker is from the ANC, Honorable Sen.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. The 2024 National Food and Nutrition Security Survey notes that about 28.8% of children aged 0 to 5 years are stunted, and this has remained relatively unchanged over the past 10 years. These are not merely statistics in a report, they are a crisis that threatens the future of our children and the prosperity of our communities. House Chair, these numbers are a human story that grimly impinge the futures and prospects, the life changes of our children, the very determinants of the well-being and quality of life of our citizens. Malnutrition can cause irreversible developmental effects such as stunted growth, impaired cognitive capacity, and an overall arrested academic endeavor. In extreme cases, severe acute malnutrition leads to death, robbing families of their children and our nation of its future. Malnutrition is also a national crisis as it perpetuates cycles of poverty, reduces economic productivity, and strains our healthcare system. Every malnourished child represents not just a health failure, but a failure to protect our most vulnerable citizens and invest in our collective future. House Chair, they effectively address severe acute malnutrition, we must dramatically scale our outpatient care programs. Hospital-based treatment alone cannot reach the thousands of children who need intervention. Community outreach must become the front line of our response, bringing services to where children live rather than waiting for families to laboriously reach out to distant health facilities. To this end, we commend the Department of Health for scaling up outpatient care programs beyond hospitals to primary healthcare facilities, as well as through community outreach. Screening for the early detection of malnutrition has been expanded through community health workers who use a simple color-coded mid-upper arm circumferences tape to screen, identify, and refer children with moderate or severe malnutrition. Pilot initiatives such as those in Gauteng and KZN are imperative in equipping community health workers to train mothers at the household level to screen for acute malnutrition using a mid-upper arm circumference tape. These initiatives bring life-saving care closer to communities, allowing children to receive treatment while remaining with their families, maintaining crucial bonds, and reducing the burden on hospital infrastructure. These programs must be adequately resourced with ready-to-use therapeutic foods, regular monitoring protocols, and clear escalation pathways for moments when children require more intensive care. Honorable Chair, community health workers are the backbone of any successful intervention strategy. They are trusted members of communities who can reach into homes, identify at-risk children, and provide ongoing support. However, we cannot expect community health workers to fulfill this critical role without proper training and support. We must invest in comprehensive training programs that equip them with skills to screen for malnutrition using mid-upper arm circumference measurements and other tools. This is why the current initiatives in the Eastern Cape are essential insofar as they build capacity to expand screening into early childhood and community nutrition development centers, involving traditional practitioners and other community development workers. Such initiatives must be scaled up to include continuous investment in refresher training, adequate compensation, and sufficient supplies. A community health worker without measuring tapes, without therapeutic food to distribute, without functioning referral system is set up to fail. We also note the positive strides made as articulated in the revised 2025 Integrated Management of Acute Malnutrition, which provides updated evidence-based treatment approaches aligned with global recommendations. In high-risk areas, children with moderate acute malnutrition benefit from combining nutrition education and counseling with supplementation with highly specialized, ready-to-use therapeutic food, as well as food supplementation to prevent deterioration into severe acute malnutrition. A consistent supply of supplements and food parcels is essential to ensure standardized care. In contrast, the need to strengthen food system to provide access, affordability, and availability of nutritious food cannot be ignored. House Chair, this also highlights the role of other relevant government departments in improving food systems and security. Malnutrition does not occur in a vacuum. Maternal depression and psychosocial stressors profoundly impact infant feeding practices and child nutrition outcomes. A mother struggling with depression may lack the energy or capacity to prepare adequate meals or respond to feeding cue. Household stress, poverty, and social isolation all influence whether children receive proper nutrition. Our nutrition interventions must therefore include psychosocial support. We need to screen mothers for depression, provide mental support, and address the social determinants that undermine good nutrition. House Chair, this requires integration among nutrition programs, social services, mental health support, and poverty alleviation initiatives. Treating the child's malnutrition while ignoring the mother's depression or family's food insecurity is short-sighted and counterproductive. House Chair, prevention remains more effective and cost-efficient than treatment. We must implement universal screening at every healthcare touchpoint. Whether a child visits a clinic for immunization, illness, or routine checkup, that visit must include a nutritional assessment. Too often, moderate malnutrition progresses to severe malnutrition because warning signs are missed or dismissed. Early screening protocols must be standardized across all facilities with clear action protocols when moderate malnutrition is detected. Healthcare workers at every level must understand that addressing malnutrition early prevents the far more costly interventions required when children deteriorate to severe acute malnutrition. In essence, Honorable House Chair, addressing malnutrition requires comprehensive action across prevention, screening, treatment, and follow-up. It demands investment in community health workers, integration of services, attention to psychosocial factors, and robust systems that ensure no child is left behind. This is not merely a healthcare challenge, it is a moral imperative and an investment in our nation's future. Let us commit today to building the systems and improving the resources necessary to ensure every child has the nutrition they need to thrive. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. The last speaker, Honorable Masango from the DA.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I wish to thank all the colleagues for their contributions towards this debate, because this debate was meant to just scan what it is that the various portfolio committees have to say about this issue. And I was encouraged to hear that from all the departments or all the portfolio committees that colleagues were speaking from, that the solutions that we are talking about today cannot come from one department alone. They cannot come from the government alone, but they have to be a whole of society approach, because the ecosystem within which a child finds itself is not just a school, it is not just a home, it is not just a CYCC, it is everywhere where a child is. And these solutions that have ranged from saying that we need to prevent the malnutrition from happening happening, but where it has unfortunately happened, we need to prioritize the services that are needed to ensure that the unfortunate tide of malnutrition can be stemmed. And I wish to thank colleagues for also mentioning that malnutrition is not something that can be looked at from the lens of social development alone, or from the Department of Basic Education or even health, but it is a broader situation where we need to make sure that what can be done, must be done to make sure that the economy of this country grows, so that people, parents of these children can get jobs, can start small businesses, so that they can afford to give children the food that is nutritious for them to grow and be participators in the economy of this country. So, Honorable Chairperson, I really would like to extend my greatest gratitude to the honorable members for their participation. And I will be obviously going through the speeches that were delivered today, because the wanting to have these solutions is so that they're not just solutions for the speech in a debate, but they can be used to make sure that what we are talking about is turned into action. Because South Africa is infamous of having good legislation, good policies, good regulations, but when it comes to making sure that those are actioned, that is where a problem lies. I also heard of some of the honorable members talking about managing the consequences of those who do not do what they are supposed to do, because each time a meal is not given to a child at school, that child is affected. So it's not a case of you think about doing something or you don't. It has to happen because a child's life is disrupted. Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. That concludes the debate and the business of this virtual mini-plenary session. The mini-plenary will now rise.